Scientology has 4 big days on its calendar. New Year's Eve, they have a big party. March 13th is the birthday of L. Ron Hubbard. They do something on their cruise ship in the summer. And then in the fall, they have a big event at this UK headquarters in East Grinstead. But the pandemic put all that, everything got stopped for a couple years. And so just this last fall, David Miscavige decided to finally restore those events to their original locations. And he began with this England St. Hill event, which is the Scientology membership organization. And up to that point, there had been some, the tabs had all decided based on some flimsy evidence that Tom Cruise had left Scientology. That was all the talk last summer. So at this November 3rd gathering, return of David Miscavige to St. Hill, Tom Cruise flew in on his helicopter. Made a big showing. Very clear statement. Tom Cruise is still as dedicated as ever. And I really think that is the case. And then in March, they were returning their birthday event to its original venue, the Ruth Eckerd Hall in Clearwater, Florida. They put out a press release about it. I'm always curious to see which celebrities are showing up because they just don't have some of the big names they used to have. So which younger celebrities are stepping up for David Miscavige? I got into their press release. It turns out they themselves posted some really interesting pictures showing that in the front row of the March 16th L. Ron Hubbard birthday event at Ruth Eckerd Hall, in the very center of the front row, standing and giving David Miscavige, were John Travolta and...
What's up, guys? If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Also, please smash that like button on the video and enjoy the show. Tony, thanks so much for being here, man. Your reporting on Scientology is 30 years long, and it's pretty incredible.
Almost 29 years, Julian. Don't give me too much credit.
How did you originally even get interested in this story? You were a journalist covering other things, is my understanding, and then something came up?
I'm from Los Angeles. I think if you grew up in L.A., you end up hearing about Scientology one way or the other. So I was aware of it. Mm. And I had actually moved to Phoenix, of all places, and was starting to do some work for a weekly newspaper there. And was just looking for fun stories. I mean, one of the things that was our mandate was to find stories that the daily newspaper had either missed or done badly. Mm. And one day I was looking through the Arizona Republic and I noticed this letter to the editor from somebody who was saying, yeah, you covered my lawsuit, but you completely missed the whole point. It was the Church of Scientology that recruited the plaintiff against me. And I thought, that sounds juicy. So I contacted this guy. His name was Rick Ross. Today, he's a very well-known, I know you're thinking of the rapper, but no, this was a very famous,
Tupac, man.
This is a very famous cult deprogram named Rick Ross. And I got to write the first real full profile of him.
Cult deprogrammer?
Yeah, so what he was doing, people were hiring him to get their kids out of Scientology and more Bible-based cults. Yeah, and so I thought that was fascinating, and so I interviewed him and did. It was my first cover story for that publication. In fact, it got me my permanent job with the Phoenix New-Times back in 1995. And Scientology was part of it. I was fascinated. It was really interesting to see how much it was trying to harass him and destroy him. I got to see that close up. So that just made me interested in other stories about Scientology. So over the years, although I covered a lot of other things, I would come back to Scientology stories every once in a while. And the company moved me around. And by 2007, they had given me the job of editor-in-chief of the Village Voice here in New York.
Wow.
So, so I was not doing Scientology then for a little while. I had my hands full. What we were trying to do at that time was take a legendary paper that had a good website and get everyone to think, no, we're a digital news enterprise that happens to put out a weekly paper. It's a different mentality. And so what I do as a manager is I try to set an example. I wanted to find something that I could put on the website every day. And at first what I was doing was going through Village Voice archives. At that point in 2007, 2008, most of the original Village Voice stories going back to the 50s and the 60s were not online. And so I was just digging through them. I was having so much fun. I found the first time they ever mentioned this young musician named Bobby Dylan. The first time they ever wrote a story about this young comic named Walter, a.k.a. Woody Allen.
Oh, wow.
So I thought they were great, right? And I'm putting them online for the first time. But the problem was people weren't reading it. They didn't care, right? So, and then every once in a while, I'd put a story about Scientology on there because I still had my old sources and everything. And it just went crazy, right? So I could see the writing on the wall. I said, look, if I'm going to put something on the website of the Village Voice every day, it's going to be about Scientology. And in April 2011, I started doing that every day, putting something about Scientology. And I was fortunate that I had sources all over the world that would send me stuff. And I've been doing it ever since then, Julian. I've been writing about Scientology. I'm the only journalist in the world that covers Scientology as a daily beat. And that's what I've been doing since 2011. I left the Village Voice in 2012 and wrote a book and started my own website. And so now I'm on Substack, tonyortega.substack.com.
Link in description.
And that's where every day, 7 a.m. Eastern, I've got something new about Scientology. Great audience, great community of people who comment. And over the years, I've gotten to break some big stories.
Every day at 7 a.m., you don't run out of things to write about with Scientology.
Well, look, some days are more important than others. It's true. Some days there's a big breaking story. Other days it's, we're having some fun with archives or, interviewing people. But it's been, it kind of comes in waves when it's really big stories. But for example, 2017, I got to break the story that Danny Masterson was being investigated by the LAPD.
Yeah, I really want to litigate this case today and go through this because I was watching this like in the background for a while. It got like retried and stuff, and
I was in court for both trials every day. I was just 15 feet away from Bijou and the rest of the family.
Yeah.
And got to see him led away in handcuffs when he was convicted after the second trial. So
how did you break the story? What happened there?
I found out that multiple women had complained about him, but what really made it a fascinating story was that the LAPD was having problems with the investigation. So if you look at the very first story I wrote in March 2017, it's all there. I've got copies of the police reports. I've got excerpts from a letter one of the Jane Does had written the chief of police complaining.
What year?
This was March 2017.
Yeah, but what year had she written approximately?
Oh, the letter was only maybe a couple weeks old when I excerpted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So right then.
I mean, it was a crisis moment. They had come to these incidents happened way back in 2002 and 2003. Right. But they had reopened this whole thing, and when the women went to them in 2016, and by early 2017, I was hearing about this and that they were really panicked because the LAPD was doing some very strange things with this investigation, things that came out later in a trial, some really strange missteps that the LAPD was doing. And these women thought, Scientology's messing this all up, or the LAPD is. And
cut them in the pocket.
And so that's what my initial story was, is that, is the LAPD, messing up this investigation? So that was a big story because then the LAPD did admit that they were looking into Danny Masterson. All the press covered it. But then I covered it, that story virtually every day from 2017 until he was convicted last May. So it's been a big part of my life. And what I always tell people is the real story is what these women have been through. They have been through so much harassment and so much, again, the LAPD was messing it up at some points. I know it looked like the prosecutors were kind of holding back.
Prosecutors were?
Well, it took so long. That story came out in March 2017. The prosecutors did not charge Danny Masterson until June 2020. So for 3 years, these women were waiting for some kind of a case to emerge.
Do you think some of that had to do with, I'm just playing a little devil's advocate here, had to do with the fact that the cases were like 14, 15 years old when they were first reported?
It's always going to be a tough case when time has passed, when you got a celebrity involved. All these things made it a difficult case.
That's right.
But you put the Scientology element in it, and that's what really makes it difficult. And
why for this?
Well, these prosecutors knew that it was going to be, what they wanted to convince the jury of was that the reason these women had not come forward earlier was they were worried about retaliation from Scientology. So you have to explain to the jury why that is, the fact that Danny's a protected celebrity. And that's why I was there, Julian, honestly, is that I wanted to see how much Scientology was a part of this case. And it was a very big part of it.
Like, as in obvious to the idea even that you see dudes sitting in the courtroom who are maybe hired thugs of Scientology?
Not just people in the gallery. The attorneys on Danny's side were doing bizarre things that only made sense if they were taking directions directly from David Miscavige,
Like
the leader of
what?
Scientology. Okay, so before there was a trial, there was something called a preliminary hearing. In a preliminary hearing, you have just the victims testify. You don't have all the witnesses testify, but you just have the women. This is the first time they testified on the witness stand.
And they're Jane Does,
The
right?
three Jane Does.
Yeah.
And this first time they got to testify was in this preliminary hearing. At that point, Danny Masterson's attorney was Tom Mesereau. If you remember Tom Mesereau, who defended
Can you pull him up, Alessi?
Michael Jackson and
big time guy.
And he, he's the one with the famous hairdo.
Great hair.
Yes.
He does have great hair.
And I was sitting just right behind him in the courtroom. This was like kind of during the pandemic, so that like there weren't very many seats. You had to sit far apart. I was sitting right behind him. And they had questioned, I can't remember, it was Jane Doe 3 was on the stand. And the attorney for Scientology leaned over you know how there's a little barrier there between the gallery seats and where the attorneys sit right. She leans over it and she's saying to him, "It's not in there. It's not in there." And see, I'm not trying to hear them, but I can't help it. They're like 3 feet from me. What she's pointing at is this Scientology book. So then Mesereau gets up and he goes up to Jane Doe and he says, you keep saying that you weren't allowed to report Danny Masterson and that's why it took you so long. And you keep saying that it's in Scientology's rules that you can't go to the police. I have the ethics book here. I'm going to ask you to look through a chapter and you tell me if you can find anything in there about not going to the police.
Was this like something written by like L. Ron Hubbard?
Yes.
Oh my God.
This is in the preliminary hearing. Okay, so we take a break. We come back, and he says, "Okay, so did you look through the book?" "Yes, I did." "Did you find anything in that chapter about not, that you can't go to the police?" And she says, "No, I couldn't." "Thank you, Your Honor." Right, like the big Perry Mason moment.
He's strutting off.
And it's very clear to me that he did that because David Miscavige had told the attorney to tell him to do that. Okay, so then the prosecutor comes up. It's his turn. He says, "Mr. Mesereau, can I borrow that book, please?" And so he takes the book and he shows her a different chapter, and it's right there in black and white. Scientologists cannot report to civil authorities. Isn't that what that says there? Yes, it is.
They think they wouldn't find that?
Right. And so this is the best moment. He walks over. Again, I'm sitting right there. He's like 3 feet from me. The prosecutor walks over, hands the book to Mesereau and says, "Thank you. That was very helpful."
That's incredible.
And that was the moment I wrote about this. This was 2021. I was like, I just witnessed David Miscavige and Scientology completely screw up Danny Masterson's defense live in front of me. That's how involved Scientology was in this. There was a huge blunder, and it kept costing them because anytime after that, when Mesereau or his successor, this guy Philip Cohen, would argue to the judge to keep stuff out of Scientology out, she would always remind them, you guys brought Scientology into this case to begin with. That blunder cost them over and over and over again.
And that was the one you're mentioning is from 2021. So that's the first trial, right?
That was the preliminary hearing.
Oh, that's right.
So that was the women, the 3 women testified, and the judge then decided there is enough evidence to have a trial. That's the point of the preliminary hearing.
Now,
these women ended up testifying 3 separate times in the preliminary hearing, the trial that had a hung jury, and then the trial that convicted him.
So that's amazing that they did this and
they
put
went through
themselves through
so
that
much
ordeal.
torture. That's what I want people to understand, how much an ordeal these women went through over so many years.
I'm always careful about this because I don't have the articles in front of me. I don't want to mess anything up because obviously you saw them and were part of this case, but without revealing who they might have been or something like that, was there a similar story with all of them as far as their background and how they came into contact with Danny and how he behaved around them to get to that point where he committed this act?
All 3 of them were Scientologists at the time of the attacks.
Oh boy.
Jane Doe 3 had been his girlfriend and they'd been living together. Jane Doe 1 was just part of their social group, and you saw him at parties. And Jane Doe 2 was a Scientologist actress that had gotten to know Danny, and he asked her over to his house one time. But also, two other women testified. The actress Trisha Vesey, a well-known actress of independent film, she testified that she was attacked by Masterson way back in '96.
Oh, so she testified on the record?
She testified in the first trial. And a woman named Kathleen Jenkins testified in the second trial that she was attacked in Toronto at a party when he was there. There's also another woman who is part of the civil suit, Babette Realis, who alleges that she was attacked by Danny, but she was not part of the criminal trial. So that's 6. But have been references to other victims in the court papers.
Right. So the three Jane Does are the ones that were the actual charges. But
They
these
were the
other people
charge
provided corroborating.
Exactly.
Got it. Whoa.
And then in the first trial, the jury hung on all 3. In the second trial, he got 2 convictions and 1 hung jury. And a really important element of this, I know it gets confusing, but you could not in California and most other places bring a charge of forcible rape against a person 20 years after the incident. But in California, there's this law where you can bring multiple charges.
Oh, wow.
It's called the one strike law. And under that, if he gets 2 or more convictions, they carry potential life sentences. And that's why the prosecutor was very clear about this in the preliminary hearings and stuff. He was saying when there's a potential life sentence involved, there's no statute of limitations. Scientology, well, I shouldn't say Scientology. His defense attorneys fought this over and over and over again, but they kept losing because, under that law. So we knew going in, when we finally found out that they had a verdict, I remember we were standing in the hallway. I was like 3 feet from Danny, and they all seemed buoyant. They thought it was going to be a hung jury. I thought it was going to be a hung jury, too.
In 2023.
The May 2023, the second trial. We heard there was a verdict, and we were all standing in the hallway after a lunch break. It was just really crowded. I'm right there by Danny, by Bijou, by Danny's mom, his brothers, right there.
Did you ever talk with them?
The brothers a little bit, but I didn't. I was conscious of not wanting to get kicked out of there. I knew if I said anything to them, they would probably ask the judge to kick me out because they really didn't like me. So I would get some funny looks from Bijou, but I never really.
They didn't like you?
I didn't really spoke to him.
No way.
Yeah. So we went in there, and I think most of us knew that if he gets 2 convictions, he's going to prison. 1 conviction is not enough. Because under the law, they were, you see, under the law, they were
after the fact too.
It's the law, under the law they were charging him with. It was the word multiple. Now 3 would mean even more time, but you need 2. And so the clerk read out the first guilty, and then read out, as soon as the clerk read out the second guilty, we heard this otherworldly wail. I can't do it. It's just like this horrendous sound because Bijou knew when it was 2, he's going to prison. And right after the second one was announced, she just wailed. And the judge said, listen, you're going to have to compose yourself or you're going to have to leave. And she was crying. She was being more quiet at that point. But see, she knew, we all knew, you needed 2, and they had the 2. So in the second trial, he was convicted on 2, hung on the third. It was close on the third.
Was that the girlfriend?
Yeah. I mean, it's always tougher with that one.
Tough.
And yeah, exactly. And look, she did great on the stand, both trials. So you really can't blame her. It's just, and we don't know what the jury.
Yeah, I don't blame. It's a tough thing to convince a
Right.
jury of 12. I was living with a guy, and
Right.
that's difficult. But why do you think they were in the 2021 trial? Why 2022, the one before it? Why do you think they came back hung on all 3?
I think that the prosecution could have done a better job. Philip Cohen, the defense attorney, did a really good job in that first trial, confusing things and raising some issues. And so the second time around, they were ready for it a little bit better. And I think one big decision they made that paid off huge was that the prosecutors were 2 deputy district attorneys named Reinhold Mueller and Ariel Anson. And Mueller handled virtually everything in the first trial. When they came back for the second trial, Ariel Anson was much more involved in the opening statements, in the interviews of the witnesses. But then the closing arguments, she was incredible. She was just absolutely amazing at
What'd
closing
she say?
The first thing she said was, it all started with a drink. And as soon as she said that, like she was telling us a story, she had everybody in the room in the palm of her hand.
Guys, if you're still watching this video and you haven't yet hit that subscribe button, please take 2 seconds and go hit it right now. Thank you.
And what both she and Reinhold Mueller did so much better in the closing of that second trial was they told a better story. And they said, look, think about it. You know, in all three, he was accused that these women had something to drink. They felt unusually intoxicated. And then he was taking advantage of them. And it was very violent. And the point they were making the second time was he had to think this out ahead of time. He had to get them the drink. He had to make sure they were in the certain place where it could happen. There was planning involved.
What was the story? Like, and it may get a little graphic, so trigger warning to people listening to this. But what was? It sounds like he would do some form of slight. I say slight because maybe it wasn't GHB, but some form of like getting them tipsy, so date rape kind of thing.
Well, both Jane Doe 1 and 2 testified that they had one drink and were like just so intoxicated afterwards, so unusually intoxicated. And the prosecutors, you know, they just flat out said it, that he drugged them. He drugged them and then raped them. And so Jane Doe 1, it involved a jacuzzi and then taking her up to a bathroom and putting her in a shower. And then Jane Doe 2, it involved inviting her over and giving her a big glass of wine. And that also involved a jacuzzi. And it was, they just both testified at how violent it was. And they were like sort of in and out of consciousness and saying, no, stop. And he was just like not, you know, it was just very violent. It was graphic, and and I can tell you, I heard their testimony 3 separate times, preliminary hearing and 2 trials. These women were absolutely consistent. I would say that they learned from being cross-examined by Tom Mesereau and then Philip Cohen twice how to, you know, answer them, you know, a little better and anticipate what was going to be asked of him a little better. But the story wasn't changing. They were absolutely consistent. They did a great job.
And you're sitting in there because Danny was on bail, so he comes in there on his own recognizance and everything. It's got to be so strange, especially after maybe you've heard all this twice and you're at the 3rd trial, he's still on bail, like walking in there every day with a coffee with his wife. It's like, this dude, unless we are really missing something here, is a serial rapist, and he's walking in the same door I am.
You know, it was funny because it was up on the 9th floor, which is the most secure floor in that building at the criminal courts building in L.A. And you have to go through security to get in the building, and then you have to go through a separate security just to get on that floor. And most days, not every day, but most days, the first 3 people on that floor were me and Danny and Bijou. And I would sit on one side of the hallway, and they would sit on the other side of the hallway. And, you know, it was just, he would always be there with a big, giant Starbucks iced coffee. And then Mom would show up, and then his attorneys would show up. And it was a little surreal, I will tell you that. Yeah,
and they know you're the guy who, like, broke this and kind of started the whole thing, which is very cool, by the way, that you were able to do that. But, you know, for people out there, obviously we've been talking about Danny Masterson now for the last 10, 15 minutes. And a lot of people know he's this really well-recognized actor. He was in that 70s show. That was kind of the original thing to put him all the way on the map. But what do we know his backstory of when he joined Scientology, or any of the thought process as to why and what types of roles he had in the organization?
Well, he was brought up in it. You know, his mom and his dad and then his stepdad were all in it.
Are they still in it?
Oh, yeah. Well, his mother still is, definitely.
Whoa.
His stepdad is not. Joe Reish is a great guy. And he's been one of my best sources about, you know, Danny's early life and what they've been through. But yeah, he was very much brought up in it, and his mom was his manager, and he was doing commercials when he was very, very young. And they were kind of part of, there was a particular larger clan of the Mastersons, the Rabisis, you know, Jason Lee,
like Giovanni Ribisi.
Yeah. Giovanni grew up in it, and his sister grew up in it.
Another amazing actor. Really?
And yeah, they were all kind of part of this young Hollywood thing, and I remember when Going Clear came out. I was fortunate enough to be part of that HBO film that Alex Gibney made, Lawrence Wright.
Great documentary.
And we went to Sundance for for the opening of that in Utah. And I remember Danny had gone to that Sundance to give like an interview trashing what we were doing. Danny was one of the celebrities that was willing to give interviews and badmouth the critics of Scientology. Very few would do that, but he grew up in it. He was kind of a fiery defender of Scientology.
He really believed in it.
Well, based on what came out in court, he knew he'd been protected by Scientology for a long time and gotten away with a lot of things.
That's the thing. I think, we're going to talk today about different ways people get brainwashed over time. You've obviously covered this for a long time from the outside to try to evaluate it from like a psychological standpoint. But when it comes to the really powerful ones that they put on a pedestal in there, someone like a Danny Masterson, best example obviously being a Tom Cruise, it does feel to me, looking at it, that the air of invincibility that they feel, meaning the actors, the famous people, with the organization operating on their behalf, seems to completely blind them to the methods with which that invincibility is born.
Right. People ask me, what's the appeal? Why do, and also I want to always point out, they have a few celebrities. It drives me crazy whenever I see a reporter say, Hollywood's got so many Scientology celebrities. No, they don't have so many. It's a few, right?
And they've got good ones though.
And they've lost some. They've lost some, right? Some older, but what's the appeal? I mean, what is Scientology? Scientology is this thing that this science fiction writer named L. Ron Hubbard came up with in the 50s. And he had this idea that there's this whole galactic drama going on that you're a part of that you've forgotten you were ever part of.
Right.
And if you can just remember who you were 100,000, million, billion, trillion years ago, you will remember how you have taken part in this galactic-wide narrative for years and years.
Now pay $35 to take this test. Thank you.
Now pay $800 or $900 an hour.
Oh my
to go
God.
through that counseling, and it takes years. I mean, it takes $1 million, $2 million to get up to that level where the top celebrities are. But that's the idea, is that and it's very attractive to some people who are unhappy with their life or they're frustrated with things, to be told, no, this person you are now is just a manifestation of this much more important thing, Thetan it's called. You're actually trillions of years old. You've been through incredible adventures. You just don't remember them. We're going to help you remember them.
I mean, I laugh, but like they get some people. They get some people who, objectively speaking, sometimes have a pretty good brain on them too.
But what I'm getting to is that, okay, so like I talked to a guy once who went through that, and he was saying, well, listen, Tony, so I remember one session, I remember that I was literally running a planet. I was running a prison planet somewhere, and I was killing people by the tens of thousands. And then the session was over, and I'm back to being Joe Blow, me, nobody. And he said, I was walking on air. I was like, I'm really somebody hugely important in the galaxy, just that nobody around me knows it. That's where that arrogance comes from.
What do you mean he was running a prison, like he was like hallucinating?
This is what auditing is. They want you to remember these things that happened to you before.
So he thought he was remembering that he had run this prison planet.
Yeah.
And he thought that was a good thing.
And they convinced themselves that, well, look, you're a big, important person, right?
I mean, Adolf Hitler was a big, important person, but I wouldn't be bragging about that. You know what I mean? Like that sounds like something he would do.
I know. It's crazy. But no, they convinced themselves that what they're remembering. I'm sorry.
You're good.
I called you by a different name. You need to go back and please change.
You did?
Yeah.
I missed it, so we're good. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. I get Dorey all the time. I get Jason sometimes. I get Jordan. Like I get something across the board, so it's all good.
Sorry.
You're fine.
Anyway, no, No, what I'm trying to explain is I think maybe this is where that arrogance comes from that you're talking about, is that they are pumped up with the idea that they're incredibly important people and that other people don't get it, but that, they really start to look down at the rest of us that don't understand what's really going on.
Yes.
And there's a superiority about Scientologists.
Well, Miscavige still looks up, but just saying.
Yeah, you want to get into that? I can get into that.
What do you mean?
Well, people often point out that he's not a tall man. And I decided to find out, this is my job. I'm a reporter. How tall is David Miscavige?
Oh, no.
So I found his former personal tailor, a man in Italy who had literally made his clothes for like 15 years.
How did you find that guy?
I actually visited him in Italy.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, on a vacation. And I asked him, I said, listen, if there's anybody in the world who knows how actually tall David Miscavige is, it's you. How tall is he? And he told me 155 max. Now that's metric.
Centimeters?
It's centimeters. I had to convert it. It's 5'1".
Oh. Is that with heels on too?
1.
Is that with like nice leather shoes on?
I know if you Google it, Google says he's 5'3". I don't know where Google gets their data. I got it from the man himself. Okay, the man who made the guy's clothes.
He is a 155. Even in Italy, that's short. My God. Whoa. So, I joke about that, but that does seem
but
to
it's,
be like a
the reason why it's important is simply that this guy wields ultimate total control over Scientology. He has since 1986, 87. Hey, you got to give the guy credit that he's able to run something like that, and he's not a tall man, whatever. But David Miscavige has now run the Scientology movement longer than L. Ron Hubbard did.
That's wild.
Who founded it?
That's wild. But he's also, he holds on to power through paranoia and domination. And, they're a mafia-like clan, but your friend Mark Bunker was in here and did an amazing job laying out some of the things they do.
There was a really tragic death at the Fort Harrison Hotel back in 1995. Lisa McPherson was a woman who was a devout Scientologist for many, many years. She was having a mental breakdown, and she got involved in a little fender-bender accident right outside the Fort Harrison Hotel. And when the paramedics arrived on the scene, she had taken off all of her clothes and was walking down the street naked. And this female paramedic comes up and says, "Why are you doing this?" And she said, "I need somebody to pay attention to me. I need help."
Right.
With the backing of, being their own kind of mafia, but some of the business maneuvers, even if they kind of cheat to do it, it's pretty smart. I mean, he buys up real estate. He obviously has he has built a very big balance sheet for a fake religion that doesn't have, more than maybe 40, 50,000 people in it. There's something about that. I don't want to give him a compliment, but it's impressive, I guess, that he's been able to, as you said, hold on to it this long and grow it as he has when the ideology behind it is so blatantly, absurdly hilarious.
That's why they can never talk about it. I mean, I would have more respect for them if they did. I mean, if they really opened up and said, "Whoa, Scientology, we're helping you recover million-year-old memories of how you're part of the galaxy's history." If they said that, I'd have more respect for them. But of course, they can't because then nobody would join.
Right.
So they have to sell it as what we call a mystery sandwich. That it's like if you watch their Super Bowl ads, it's like reach your potential. Well, that sounds good. I'd like to reach my potential.
I like potential.
Right. So they make it seem like it's more of like a self-help organization.
Yes.
And they don't tell you that you're going to be spending years spending hundreds of dollars an hour removing invisible alien entities from your body. Because see, you're a Thetan and you're 76 trillion years old. However, along the way, other Thetans have attached themselves to you. You just can't see them.
Thetans.
Yeah, they're called body Thetans. And so from, you go through this progression called the Bridge to Total Freedom, and you go through the grades and you go clear, and then you go into the OT levels. They're called operating Thetan levels. Once you get past OT3, from OT3 to OT7, this will take you years and years. Through those levels, you're simply trying to find, locate, and remove body Thetans, these invisible beings.
They're just making it up as they go.
Well,
Obviously.
they don't think they're making it up. They're trying to locate them with that e-meter, and they think they found them, and then they tell them to go away. I mean,
be gone,
Julian.
They just left.
I know you think this is funny, but this is what they spend so much money on.
Show me on the bear where the Thetan touched you.
Exactly.
So, who's the highest level OT level you've ever spoken with who left?
Well, I've spoken to OT8s. Yeah, absolutely. OT8's the highest, and I've spoken to several, and they help me plot out what all those levels are, and we've published them. I've published the OT8 level.
What do they have to say about being in that long and putting that much into it, and then realizing it's all a lie?
They're hurt. It can be embarrassing to come forward and say that they have wasted so much money. Maybe their family's been ripped apart.
Yeah.
And it can be very difficult. That's why I think there's, a small independent movement of former Scientologists, former church members who still hold on to, quote, the technology and still want to believe that stuff is true. But most people move out of it entirely and realize, oh, no, the whole thing was just, a figment of L. Ron Hubbard's imagination. But yeah, I've spoken to people who were OT8, and it's hard for them to talk about what they went through because the cruel OT3 to OT7 are different ways of removing body Thetans. So I love OT4. I just think is so great. You're literally dealing with the drug problems of your body Thetans.
They're drug addicts too.
But they've been using like space coke from 20 million years ago that's better than anything you can get on Earth.
How do we get that?
Exactly.
Let's get it right here.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy stuff. And so OT3, 4, 5, 6, OT7, finally OT7, which can take years and years and years. You finally remove the last of your body Thetans. Now, and you can only do those top couple, like OT6 and 7, at the Flag Land Base in Clearwater, Florida. That's why they make so much money there, is all these Scientologists from around the world go there. That's the only place they can get that. Then when you're finally ready for OT8, the only place you can get OT8 is on the cruise ship in the Caribbean, the Freelands.
Oh, yeah.
That is the only place you can do OT8. And what's so cruel about OT8 is that, you've been spending all this time, all these years, removing body Thetans and trying to understand who you were millions and billions of years ago. And on OT8, they tell you, okay, all those memories you thought you recovered, they were the memories of the body Thetans. All those memories are who you are not. And now that you know who you are not, now you can begin from the beginning and learn who you are. It's the biggest, prank L. Ron Hubbard ever played. And you can only get there after 1 million or 2 million. So this is why people don't like to talk about it, is because they've been pranked so badly.
It's you're right. It's just from a pride standpoint, it's so hard to admit that. But I can't even imagine, because you're pointing out, it's so many years and years in between OT levels. If you're talking to an OT8, you're talking to someone who's been in there for at least 2 decades.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to somebody that it took them 20 years to do OT7. OT7
just to do OT7.
OT7 is legendary as the toughest.
What do they have to do specifically?
It's so bad, Julian. It's so bad.
Tell me how bad it is,
low
Tony.
auditing. You're at home auditing yourself, trying to find your body Thetans on your own.
Are you using a laser pointer? How's this go down?
No, the e-meter. You're using the e-meter with yourself.
They send you one at home.
You have it at home. You're using it on yourself. You're trying to find these body Thetans and get rid of them.
Is this like Ben Stiller in Dodgeball, where he has the electrical sockets on his nipples?
Well, let me tell you.
E-meter, let's go.
Listen, let me tell you that John Brousseau told me. John Brousseau was David Miscavige's brother-in-law and worked very close with Tom Cruise. John Brousseau said the closest anybody has ever come to doing an impression of David Miscavige that's accurate, it was the Ben Stiller character in Dodgeball.
That is not a compliment in any way, shape, or
You made me bleed my own blood.
I didn't know that. Like,
If you want to know what David Miscavige is like, watch Dodgeball and watch Ben Stiller's character.
Oh my God. If anyone ever said that about me, I'd off myself. Like, there's no coming back from that. Like, that's
coming from his former brother-in-law.
Yeah. Now, he also had a big falling out with his father, who I think just passed away a couple years ago.
Right.
It was Ron Miscavige,
right? So Ron Miscavige Sr. had 4 children. Ron Miscavige Jr., twins, David and Denise Miscavige, and then another daughter, Lori.
Okay.
So David Miscavige is the leader of Scientology, and Ron became a Sea Org member on the base. He was a trumpet player and ran the band.
Did he originally get his son into it?
Yes. So in 1979, I think. Let's see. Dave was 16, is 76. So even earlier than that. Anyway, when Dave was in school, he had asthma problems, and Ron thought maybe Dianetics could help, and that's why he got them into it initially. And they ended up going to England, and they were learning to become auditors. And Dave was like the phenom, right? He was like the 14-year-old hot shit auditor that was going to be like the next big thing. He eventually ended up in 1978 in the California desert, where Ron Hubbard was making movies, and David had become what's called a messenger, which is one of these young aides to Hubbard. And there's photos where Ron is directing a scene and little David Miscavige is running a camera. He became like the second or third cameraman under Ron. And that proximity to him is how he curried favor, and was eventually in the 80s, when Ron was in hiding and nobody knew where he was. Ron Miscavige. Ron Hubbard had an aide named Pat Broker with him.
When he was in hiding.
David Miscavige was at the base with everybody. Broker and David Miscavige would meet to pass messages between each other in order to keep Hubbard still running Scientology. So because Pat Broker and David Miscavige were the bottleneck, and nobody knew where Hubbard was, that's why they amassed power. Is everyone had to go through those two guys. So when Ron Hubbard died, the big question then was, which of those two guys is going to take over, Pat Broker or David Miscavige? And supposedly Hubbard favored Pat Broker, but Dave muscled him out of the way. And
how did he do that? I mean, he's not very big.
I mean, people have talked about how people had talked about how, once you can get the power in there and you can make people get punishments, he just one after another deposed people that, were in a position of power until he was the last one. So now he's in charge of he's got the attorneys on his side. He's got all the materials.
What became of that other guy? What was his
That
name
was a
again?
great question. Pat Broker. So Pat and Annie Broker were actually with L. Ron Hubbard in his last years in hiding.
Sorry to hear that.
And as Ron was deteriorating and kind of going, losing his mind.
Could you imagine that guy losing his mind? Like, he just spent a lifetime losing his mind, losing it as he's dying. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think it was rough. And I just don't think Pat Broker had the kind of ruthless mentality you would need to take over at that point. And Dave pushed him out of the way. But then Dave was very concerned about him. So he hired 2 former cops to follow Pat Broker for the next 22 years. He paid them about $500,000 a year. And wherever Pat Broker went, these 2 guys went. And I interviewed them because they eventually were kicked out and sued Scientology. And they talked to us reporters for like a day. I got to talk to them for half a day, and then the Tampa Bay Times guys got to talk to them for half a day. And they were saying that, yes, we're all used to the idea that Scientology will do what's called a noisy investigation on people. They want you to know you're being followed. They want to freak you out. They want your family members to know that they're being watched. They were on a different kind of thing. Their mandate was, you're going to follow Pat Broker 24 hours a day, forever. But he can't know it. So, for example, this was like in the late 80s. They rented the house next to Broker's without him knowing it. But they had one of them had enlisted his dad to befriend Pat Broker, and they would meet in a bar, get to know him, and had the dad give Pat Broker for one Christmas in the late 80s a cordless phone. And back then, the very first cordless phones,
the Gordon Gekko thing,
the signal between the handheld and the base unit was a radio signal. And so they had rented the house next door so they could intercept the signal and they could listen into all of Pat Broker's calls.
That's nuts.
For years, Pat Broker was followed by these two cops and never knew it. And he eventually went to the Czech Republic for a while. And then
followed him there?
They followed him there, came back to the United States. And, what became clear over time was Pat Broker had no interest in taking over Scientology or having anything to do with Scientology anymore. He was like a college English teacher somewhere, So
he had officially left the church?
He had nothing to do with it anymore. But Miscavige is so paranoid that he would come back and try to make some sort of return that he has him watched it 24 hours a day.
He has the type of paranoia you hear about when you read the history books about the biggest despots, and we can all name them.
He's an absolute ruler. He's an absolute ruler. He runs the entire organization. Nothing happens without his say so. And then so you would ask him about his father. So his father, Ron Miscavige, was on the base with him, and eventually he just couldn't take it anymore. He just was sick and tired of it, and he was married to a younger woman, and they decided to make an escape.
An escape.
Yeah, to escape the base in Southern California. And one of my favorite details, I talked about this, it's just crazy. They didn't just want to leave everything. They wanted some of their possessions. And so they came up with this idea that they were going to mail birthday presents to, I think, her mom. And she's going to be 75. We're going to send her 75 gifts. It's a fun thing to do. And they were actually mailing out their own possessions to her so they would have some things.
What is the base?
I'll get to that. Including L. Ron Hubbard books.
Oh, because they wanted to smuggle it out.
So, in other words, Ron Miscavige wanted to escape from the base and get out from under his son's, rulership. But he was still a Scientologist. He still believed in L. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So they were smuggling out L. Ron Hubbard books because they couldn't imagine living without them. They wanted to escape the base. Anyway, it's just so sad.
What is the base like?
Okay, so you know about the Big Blue former hospital in downtown Los Angeles. That's right. Called PAC Base, Pacific Area Command. 90 miles east of that. In San Jacinto, California, they had taken over this resort called Gilman Hot Springs in 1979, I think, with the idea that it would be where Hubbard could live in some seclusion. But then he took off and never ended up living there. So that became their international management base. It's got like 400 or 500 acres. It's got all these buildings to it. That's where the Headleys were for many, many years. Mike Rinder spent a lot of time out there. And eventually,
we'll come back to the Headleys.
In 2004, Miscavige was so paranoid about his own people, he created a prison for them called the Hole. The Hole started at the Int Base or Gold Base in January 2004. There's still some version of it today. I mean, there's still top executives that have been basically disappeared that will never leave that base, that David had for some reason decided that they were a liability. But, Mike Rinder spent a couple of years in the Hole there.
I had asked Mark about this, and it was hard for even him to answer. He's been covering this forever because it's so strange. But how do they have a private prison and that itself is not grounds for the feds to come in and say this is false imprisonment, completely illegal? And what Mark was saying is that, people can technically leave if they want to. And I'm like, can they though?
No, it's the problem is the risk for law enforcement is that there's no question, especially in that period. And the FBI did consider it. There was an investigation. This is what Lawrence writes. One of the things he revealed when he came out with this story about Paul Haggis in the New Yorker in
Another great director.
2011, he he revealed that there was an FBI investigation. In fact, in October 2010, the FBI was getting very close to raiding that base, to the point where Mark Headley told me that they had asked him, they figured Miscavige would run for Burbank to where Tom Cruise has his planes. And so they literally recorded the tail numbers on Tom Cruise's planes so they would have that. I talked to another ex-Scientologist, Matt Pesh, who told me that they had asked him, will you come in the vans with us when we drive on so that there's somebody with us that knows where everything is? And Matt said, I'm ready to go. That's how close they were to raiding that base in October 2010. They did not do so. The risk here, here's the risk, Julian. The risk is they go on there, they open the door, there's all these people in there that have been prisoners for years. Come on out, you're free. The risk is they say, oh, no, we're not prisoners. We're fine where we are. And then you're screwed if you're law enforcement. You are screwed. And so that's why they ultimately have a hard time doing it, is that, as you know, Mike Rinder will tell you, the bars were inside the head. It wasn't the locked door that was keeping them in. So
and it was locked.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They were there. They have no freedom. They had no freedom. The people that were in the hole. I think they have a little more freedom today. I think that whole base has been de-emphasized because it became so close to being raided. Miscavige moved the studios out to a new studio in LA on Sunset Boulevard. He's moved much more stuff to Florida now. That base is much less important today than it used to be. And I think it's because he knew he was vulnerable there to an FBI raid.
What made that guy, you mentioned Matt Pesh, who was the Scientologist who told you about them checking the planes and knowing what was going on. What eventually made him leave Scientology?
Well, Mark Headley was the one who told me about the plane numbers. Matt Pesh was the one who told me that they had asked him if he would go on the van with them if they raided the base, and he said yes. Matt is married to Amy Scobie, and she's also a fascinating figure. They met in Scientology. Amy was at the very top. She wrote a book called At the Top or something. Great story about how she saw what she saw in Scientology. All these people have incredible stories where they were in the Sea organization. They were treated so badly over so many years, and that something finally woke them up. Each one of them has a different story about what it was where they finally like, why am I wasting my life here? And then they have to get out, and getting out is not easy. And every single, from Mike Rinder to Matt Pesh to Amy Scobie to Mark Headley to Claire Headley, they all have a fascinating story of what finally woke them up, and then how do you get out? When Scientology, they literally have something they call the blow drill. Mark's great at telling this story, where if somebody left the base, they had this protocol that they would follow to get that person back, and they'd
blow them.
No, that's.
Sorry,
I know. That's the play on words. I know. No, they've blown the base, and now they go into the blow drill to find that person, track them down, bring them back. I talked to one guy. He had escaped 5 separate times, and each time they would find him, they'd come back and they'd intimidate the hell out of him and said, "You can't leave this way. You need to come back and route out properly." It's called route out. And they'd talk him into it, and he'd come back, and then he'd be like, "What am I doing?" Finally, the 5th time, he's like, "No." And he realized there was nothing they could do. It's just, like I said, the mental influence is so strong for these people.
But is it also because, like, these people trying to leave, they've been inside, so I would imagine many of them have seen fellow Scientologists when they tried or did leave, and the pressure that was put on them vis-a-vis things like, you know, being watched on their street, private investigators who are armed up, and what, like, are they worried about that more than like, oh, these guys are going to shoot me right here?
Right. They don't, Scientology doesn't kill people outright. They ruin
Allegedly.
lives. They ruin lives.
Yeah.
I mean, L. Ron Hubbard Jr. once said of his dad that my dad isn't going to kill you. What he wants is to see you out of a job, out of your house, in a gutter, crying somewhere. That's,
like you need him.
That's what he wants. He wants to see you in that pitiful state. And that was, he said that in the 70s, and that's still what the program Scientology follows today. They like to destroy people. Yeah, they don't just shoot people.
God, that's it. Like, there are the sick people in this world who don't get off on feeling good. They get off on inflicting pain. And that's exactly to a T who L. Ron Hubbard obviously was.
Well, especially David Miscavige. I mean, that's the people who know him know that he really, the first thing he wants to know when he gets up in the morning is, okay, who blew? Who's gone today? And now we got to go get them. That's the first thing he wanted to know every morning is who's left. Yeah.
What a sick guy.
Yeah.
What's the story with the Headleys? We've mentioned them a couple times.
I mean, they're wonderful people. They both got in very young. They both grew up in it. They ended up at Int Base.
At where?
Gold Base, Int Base. This base I've been talking about.
Oh, right, where the hole is.
Where the hole is.
Yeah.
They were there and they met. They got married very young. But in the Sea Org, you're not supposed to have kids. And no, you cannot have children.
They don't want them reproducing little baby Scientologists?
No, I know. They recruit the new ones from the publics, they're called, the people that are not working for the church. But the people who are working in the Sea Org cannot have children. That's strange. And they both had interesting positions. They were both in positions of real authority. And eventually they too saw the abuses and they wanted out. And they have a wonderful story about how Mark was the first to leave, and he knew he couldn't tell her about it because they're so good at interrogating people. And he knew that the best thing he could do for her is that she was just going to have to escape on her own. I mean, it's an incredible love story because
so sad,
she then had to escape and hope that he still wanted to be with her. And so he escaped first, then she escaped. They each had, ways of getting out that were.
How did he escape?
He grabbed a motorcycle, I think, and just drove and got pulled over. She had to use the ploy of needing to go to a dentist or a doctor, and then ran away when she was at the appointment. I mean, they each had to come up with these different ways of getting out. Mark has written a wonderful book called Blown for Good, and I remember I got to write about it when I was at the Village Voice. But it's a great, and he's such a good storyteller. Wonderful book about their escape. And they're still doing incredible things today. They were on Leah's show, and they do amazing work today. They've got this thing called the Aftermath Foundation where they help people leave Scientology.
So like the Underground Railroad or something?
Sort of like the Underground Railroad,
Wow.
exactly. Yeah.
So people can I'm just guessing how this goes. People can reach out to them anonymously and say, I want to leave. What do we do? And they say, here's where you're going to get shelter and shit like that.
No, that's exactly how it works.
Wow.
Yeah. And they have helped people, and people come forward and because it's all confidential, but some people have come forward and says, I want people to know that the Aftermath Foundation helped me. And yeah, they do great work there. And it's not easy.
It's so... you think about these things, and it's not just Scientology. It's one example of it, obviously, but crime often has such a psychological component to it that it happens right in front of our faces when we walk on the street, and the people who are in the middle of it can't just walk up and say, hey, this is a crime. Can you please help me? There's this thing. We hear about it with trafficking things all the time. You'll see that, kids will get on a commercial jet with the person trafficking them, and they don't tell anyone about it because they've been so psychologically damaged. What some of the people, you've obviously mentioned some throughout the day today and told some stories, but some of the ex-Scientologists who maybe are sources for you now or that you've had to talk with, how long does it take? Were they aware of that once they decided to leave, or it started to fill in for them later how psychologically
the mental
damaged?
Conditioning is so deep and so damaging. It's incredibly difficult to leave. First of all, it's very difficult for them to understand what's happening to them and to understand they're being victimized. Once they finally start to realize that, then it's incredibly difficult just to get out. They know that Scientology will retaliate by having their family members cut off from them and friends, and they'll lose their job. But then even if they're able to get through all of that and get out, the mental thing is still there. I mean, people have told me that it will take 10 or 12 years before they finally can get rid of that Scientology way of thinking about other people.
10, 12 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard. That's why somebody like Chris Shelton is kind of amazing, because most of these people will just go away for years, and then they start to come back and they're curious about how things are going, and then eventually they become activists. Chris Shelton left Scientology, and like a month later, he's on YouTube talking about it. I've always been amazed at how well.
Who's he?
He's a YouTuber. He's a really good YouTuber about talking about Scientology. He was a Sea Org member. He and I do a little thing every week where we go over the Scientology news together. Great guy, and I was just always amazed at how quickly he went from a Sea Org member to somebody exposing Scientology. But most people have to go through a much longer period.
Why do you think his was so fast?
You know,
like that?
I don't know. I give him a lot of credit that he was able to do that. He's been out now. He's been speaking out now for 10 years. And I'm still amazed that, like, for example, now another new person who's come out recently is named Alex Barnes Ross. He's in England, and he's really waking people up to Scientology's problems in England.
Hey guys, if you have a second, please be sure to share this episode around on social media and with your friends, whether it's Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, doesn't matter. It's all a huge help. It gets new eyeballs on the show, and it allows us to grow and survive. So thank you to all of you who have already been doing that, and thank you to all of you who are going to do so now.
But he had to go away for like 10 years before he could start talking about it.
Do you have any, I want to bookmark England for 1 second. I just want to make sure I ask this. When some of these people come out, obviously you've been reporting on this for 29 years, so you're an enemy of the church, I would imagine. Have you had guys give you intel on things Scientology may be plotting against you to make your life uncomfortable?
Yeah, no, they try to make things tough on me, and they've run various operations against me. Probably the most elaborate is that I'm married to somebody who has a great job, and they have tried to run multiple operations against her to get her bosses freaked out to get her fired.
Whoa.
And in one of those operations, they actually hired an out-of-work New York Daily News reporter to pretend he was working on her and that she was involved in some scandal or something. And, fortunately, the people my wife works for are very intelligent people, and they could see that it was kind of a scam, and they didn't fall for it. But I mean, I've had people close to me, people I care about, tell me that they'd been harassed by a Scientology PI on other continents. I mean, they have spent so much money. They never just call me up and say, we don't like that story, we want a correction, or, here we have a statement. I'd love to put their statements in my stories, Julian.
Do you call them and ask for
I ask for statements. I send them requests for statements.
That's journalistic integrity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they never get back to me. Instead, they go and harass my mom. They've sent a private investigator twice to intimidate my mother in California.
How so, if you don't mind saying?
Well, I mean, knocking on the door and kind of getting her all flustered and trying to ask her questions about me. And it's just disgusting.
And these private investigators, correct me if I'm wrong, usually they're not members of Scientology themselves.
That one is.
That one is.
That one. He's kind of notorious. I think he's finally done now. But yeah,
even he left.
No, I think what happened was he got exposed. Mike Rinder and I wrote some stories about him, and David Miscavige doesn't like it when a private investigator like that gets so exposed, and I think he stops using him as much.
And so the guy left the church?
I think he's still in the church. I haven't heard much about him in the last couple of years, though, Julian. I'll admit I don't know exactly what he's up to. But the guy I'm talking about is named Dave Lubow, and for years he was. First, there was a guy named Eugene Ingram. He was notorious, but then Dave Lubow became kind of the chief dirty tricks PI for Scientology, and they used him against me. They used him against a bunch of different people, and that's not him.
How do you spell his name?
David Lubow, Lebow.
Lebow.
Let's see, a picture of him.
There's Paul.
I wrote about him a number of times, but
Is that him?
yeah, that's him. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like all the Scientology.
He would get in Mike Rinder's face. He got in my mother's face. What
a scumbag.
But then but like I said, we wrote about him a number of different times, and I think Dave Miscavige decided to use other people. But they've run numerous operations against me, and they've tried to,
oh, there he is with Mike.
Yep, there we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike was really really used to him, but No, they've tried a lot of different things against me, and the things they do, most of what they do is just online smearing. They mischaracterize the things I've done in the past and just smear me all day and night on Twitter and stuff. It's just, I just ignore it.
Do you ever sleep with one eye open, a little afraid?
No, I mean, the best thing to do, they want you to be afraid. The whole point of what Dave Lubow is doing, what Eugene Ingram was doing, what some other people they've got now, they want you to be afraid. They want you to feel like, oh, they're what are they going to do to my family? And then they want you to be so afraid you stop. But if you just think, they're not really, there's only so much they can do. But believe me, the reason why they do it is it works. There are many people that are not talking today because they've gotten that intimidation from Scientology and they've decided it's not worth it and they stop talking. No question. But I won't shut up. So too stupid to stop, I guess.
Well, I'm glad you're not, because it does take brave reporting. I said the same thing to Mark Bunker, to be able to get these stories and maybe, if there's ways to reach them, because they live among us, also continue to reach people who are inside the church and come across this stuff and, I don't know, get woken up from it. But, I mean, the scope of Scientology, despite maybe the lack of numbers, is always so shocking to me. Obviously, they have the home base in Clearwater. You mentioned they're doing more and more in Florida now, but they've been all over and at least continue to be in some ways in California. But they're also global. Like we keep mentioning England, and this is not something I got into with Mark at all in episode 203. But like, what's Scientology set up in? Is it in London, or like what's the story over there?
When L. Ron Hubbard started things, he wrote Dianetics when he was living in New Jersey, actually.
All right, can we run that back? Like, I like this state, okay? Yeah, I did know. He wrote it in, like, Edison or something.
He was in Elizabeth.
That's dangerously close.
Yeah. And, or I don't know where the house was exactly. Anyway.
Let's not find out.
The first foundation was in Elizabeth. And, but LA became a very important LA became basically the world headquarters for a long time. But yeah, he spread it. But then, see, that was in the early 50s, 54, 55. But then what happened was, and then he created a church in D.C. called the Founding Church, but it really wasn't the first. But it was an important one in D.C. as well. But what the problem he ran into in those early years was he was making a lot of health claims. If you did Dianetics, you did Scientology, it would heal anything, including cancer. That got him in trouble with the government. And so I mean, I like to say, back then, if you made those kind of claims, you got in trouble with the FDA. Today, if you make those claims, they give you a TV series. But
it's very true. I know it's true.
But back then,
I lived it.
It got you in trouble, and so he that's why he went to England in 1959. Was that he was uncomfortable with how the American government was, getting up in his business. So he went to England in 1959. He bought this estate in Sussex called St. Hill. And he had gotten it from some Maharaja of India that had owned it or something. I don't know the exact name. I never know this stuff off the top of my head. I always have to look it up.
St. Hill.
But it's an estate called St. Hill in Sussex. And that became the English headquarters for Scientology. Now, there are facilities in London. There's what they call an ideal org in London. But to this day, the most important location probably in all of Europe is in St. Hill in Sussex. There also is a European headquarters in Copenhagen. And those are probably the two most important locations in Europe. But to this day...
Where's that on a map, Alessi, if you don't mind?
I think it's southeast of London. If you get a map out of it's East Grinstead, and back out, you'll see.
Let's zoom out where we are.
Yeah,
all the way.
South of London, not southeast. South of London, right?
Hour and a half south.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And to this day, very important site for them. I was telling you before the show started, Scientology has 4 big days on its calendar. New Year's Eve, they have a big party. March 13th is the birthday of L. Ron Hubbard. They do something on their cruise ship in the summer. And then in the fall, they have a big event at this, UK headquarters in East Grinstead, England.
This podcast was born on L. Ron Hubbard's birthday.
Wow, really?
God damn it. All right, so 4 big days, we got it.
And then, but the pandemic put all that, everything got stopped for a couple years. And so just this last fall, David Miscavige decided to finally restore those events to their original locations. And he began with this England, the St. Hill event. It's called IAS, for the International Association of Scientologists, which is the Scientology membership organization. And it's really their slush fund. It's their defense fund. You pay a lot of money in Scientology for services. That auditing we talked about with the finding the invisible body Thetans. But they also just want you to give straight donations. Just give money so that Dave can do things like build ideal orgs, fight lawsuits, that kind of thing. That's called the IAS. And so they have their big annual gathering at St. Hill. This year, it's usually in October. This year, they held it the first weekend in November. And up to that point, there have been some, the tabs had all decided based on some flimsy evidence that Tom Cruise had left Scientology. That was all the talk last summer.
The tabloids?
Yeah. All the press, the tabloid press, were all claiming that based on some very flimsy evidence that Tom Cruise had left Scientology. So I think Scientology was sensitive to that. So at this November 3rd gathering in England, the return of the IIS to St. Hill, the return of David Miscavige to St. Hill, Tom Cruise flew in on his helicopter, made a big showing. And then the second night, which is called the Patrons Ball, when they celebrate the big donors, not only was Tom there in black tie, but he was glad-handing all the folks that were at the party. They were all shaking his hand, taking selfies with him, and then they posted the selfies to social media, which normally Scientology's not cool with. I think Scientology allowed it this time because they wanted to counter those tabloid rumors. And so, it was a big thing for them. They had returned their event to its home in England. Tom Cruise had shown up, and then pictures of Tom Cruise with the Scientologists were out on social media. Very clear statement. Tom Cruise is still as dedicated as ever. And I really think that is the case. Then in December, late December, they filmed their New Year's Eve party that they then let everybody see on New Year's Eve at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. They had a big showing there. And then in March, they were returning their birthday event to its original venue, the Ruth Eckerd Hall in Clearwater, Florida. They put out a press release about it. I'm always curious to see which celebrities are showing up because, they've lost some, Julian. They've lost Kirstie Alley. They lost Kelly Preston.
Died. Yeah.
Kelly Preston, Kirstie Alley, Chick Corea, all 3 died of cancer. Laura Prepon announced in People magazine that she had left. Beck Hansen told an Australian newspaper that he had left. Danny Masterson's in prison. And, Leah Remini left. Lisa Marie Presley had left, and then she had died. They just don't have some of the big names they used to have. So which younger celebrities are stepping up for David Miscavige?
Well, the big ones are Cruise and Travolta, right?
Right. The big ones are Cruise and Travolta, and Cruise definitely showed up to that St. Hill celebration.
Right.
So I was curious to see who's showing up at the L. Ron Hubbard birthday. And I got into their press release, and it turns out they themselves posted some really interesting pictures showing that in the front row of the March 16th L. Ron Hubbard birthday event at Ruth Eckerd Hall, in the very center of the front row, standing and giving David Miscavige, were John Travolta and Elizabeth Moss.
No.
A very pregnant Elizabeth Moss giving a standing ovation to David Miscavige.
Why do they always get the good ones? She's so good.
And the reason this is so significant, and it's interesting because none of the, a lot of reporters follow.
There she is.
A lot of reporters follow my Substack, and none of them said anything about this. I thought that was really odd. But the reason why this is important is that we've never seen her at one of these events before. Her dad had died in January, and we know that he had kind of been in David Miscavige's doghouse for a long time.
Her dad was in it.
When I asked Mike Rinder what he thought, about this picture, about Elizabeth Moss being in the front row with John Travolta. He said it really reminded him what they did with Tom Cruise 20 years ago, when Tom Cruise was just sort of on the edges and they brought him in and really got him gung-ho to the point where he was willing to go on TV and talk about Scientology with Matt Lauer and all that stuff.
You're being glib, Matt.
Yes.
So glib.
Mike Rinder really believes that they may be doing that with Elizabeth Moss, and John Travolta's there sort of as the older guiding hand, helping her out. I mean, this took some effort. She's very pregnant, you know, standing in the front
she's
row.
about to pop.
Yeah. So, really kind of an amazing moment. And I think maybe they are getting her more involved and getting her more visible. Now, they didn't put this out in a way that the public could easily see it. I don't know that they really wanted us to know that she was there, but I found it. And
how'd you find it?
let's just say I took a very close look at their press release.
Okay.
And
we'll talk about that one off air.
And then I also looked. And then once I found that for this year's L. Ron Hubbard event, I decided to go back a couple years and see who else had showed up. And it turns out that last year's 2023 L. Ron Hubbard birthday event, I found a photo showing that Michael Pena
Damn it!
had been at that event. And I have never...
Another one!
I knew Michael Pena was a Scientologist, but I had never seen Michael Pena show up to one of these events before. I think that's significant. Again,
Kiki, what are you doing?
I think these younger Scientologist celebrities are being expected to step up a little bit now that some of the older ones are gone.
Oh, if he starts getting like so many leading man roles now too, we're gonna know it's Scientology. God damn it. So that's what they rely on. They rely on being able to market 4 or 5 huge names to say, look at us, we're normal.
Right.
Because even important famous people not only want to be a part of this, but are like excited and are towards the top of it. So if you join, you could be like them.
Right. And they have been told, they have been conditioned, say, you know, what they can say. You know, oh, get a book. It helped my life. It'll help your life. And you can go back, and it's always very programmatic. They always say the same thing. Yeah, it really helped my life. You should get a book and read it.
Yeah, that's what Grant Cardone says.
And I talked to Jason Begay about this. Jason was one of the few celebrities other than Leah and Remini who left and spoke out. And he said, yeah, we're trained that way. We can't, you can, what, you think we're going to say to a reporter, oh yeah, it's great to remove your invisible body thetans at only $700 an hour. It's a gas, you know?
Oh my God. So, but we got off it for a second. Elizabeth Moss's father, you mentioned, was in the doghouse.
Elizabeth Moss's father, Ron Moss, was a musician and a manager, and he managed Chick Corea. And the way that Mike Rinder and Claire and Mark Headley explained this to me was that back around the year 2000, 2001, Chick Corea suddenly found himself in a serious financial problem. And that could be potentially very embarrassing for Scientology because he's OT8. An OT8 Scientologist should not be having financial problems. And so, first of all, they bailed him out. David Miscavige bought the Mad Hatter studio from Chick, which got him money and helped him out. But they all, as Mike explained, they needed somebody to blame. So they blamed his manager, Ron Moss. And so for the next 20 years, Ron was kind of on the outs. He couldn't talk. When Chick Corea died a couple of years ago, Ron Moss went on a music podcast and said, I didn't speak to him the last 20 years. And he admitted it. He said that. He hadn't spoken to him. It's because Scientology wouldn't allow him to. He had basically gotten demoted, but they couldn't really kick him out or retaliate against him because his daughter was doing so well, right? So now that he has died, he died in January.
Was she in it, like from
She's
childhood?
Yes, she's always been in it. She's defended it to the press. But I think now that her dad has died and he was kind of on the outs with Miscavige, just 2 months later, after Ron Moss died, Elizabeth Moss is in the front row giving David Miscavige a standing ovation at the L. Ron Hubbard birthday. I think that's very significant. I think it shows he's banking on her to, increase her involvement and become perhaps the next great ambassador of Scientology after Tom Cruise.
Now she's been in it. Like
she grew up in it.
Because these other guys, though, well, we'll get to Leah. Like she grew up in it, but
Michael Pena is one of the few who joined as an adult.
Yeah.
As
So
a
why do they
celebrity.
have so much trouble? I mean, to me, it should be obvious, but like, why do they have so much trouble recruiting, the new young actor who might have a shot or something like that?
I mean, the word's out that it's weird. The word is out that it's abusive. I think it's tougher for them to recruit. I'm amazed that they got Michael Pena, aren't you? I mean, in 2001, people knew that Scientology was problematic, but apparently he was interested. He has said in interviews that he was on the edge of a drinking problem. He wasn't like, major drinking problem, but he was on the edge of a drinking problem and he wanted some way to get control of it. And he believes he found that in Scientology.
The Thetans. There you go.
Yeah. It was the Thetans doing it to him.
So, sorry. That's kind of funny. But like Giovanni Ribisi, was that another one who grew up in it?
Absolutely. And, so you'll still see people writing stories. I just saw one in Touch Weekly, and then a bunch of others have all followed up now that, well, we haven't seen Tom Cruise in L.A. recently. Maybe he's leaving Scientology. What is it? They always want to write that story. And they didn't. How does a reporter like that not at least acknowledge that just 5 months ago, Tom made such a huge showing in England for Scientology,
Yeah.
David Miscavige.
It clicks.
So, it's just, I do what I can to try to show what's actually happening with these celebrities. And right now, Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Elizabeth Moss, Michael Pena, they are solid for David Miscavige.
Do you think that the coverage of Scientology in general is weird? And let me clarify what I mean there. It seems like it's used for the clicks of like the regular gossip page 6 stories, like when someone might leave or not. But it is allowed by the press to operate without much coverage when you have some of these famous people in the middle of it. You have the cult angle. You have the dead cult leader angle. You have the 4'10" guy running this and telling everyone to get lost, or 155 centimeter. Let's give them everyone the counts.
4'13",
whatever it is. Like, there is so much here. There's so much juice here, and yet it seems to be just kind of the only thing they report on is like, well, are they leaving or aren't they?
I will say that the press coverage has actually improved. I really do think it's gotten better. There was famously an amazing Time magazine cover story that came out in May 1991, which called Scientology the global cult of greed or something. And Scientology sued for $400 million against Time magazine. Time eventually won that lawsuit, but they spent millions fighting it.
Mm-hmm.
That created a chilling effect throughout the 90s that made it really difficult for people to do stories. People still did stories. I still did stories. Washington Post did great stories, but it definitely produced a chilling effect. Tom Cruise's antics, though, in 2005 really changed things. It started to open things up again. But even then, the coverage was, like you said, it's kind of goofy. It's focused on celebrities. I would say, though, that the last 10 years, the coverage has gotten much better thanks to people like Leah Remini, for example, who's really focusing on the things that matter. Alex Gibney in his movie, which I was very fortunate to be in, Going Clear. I think publications are more interested in the story about the actual abuses that are going on, what people go through that go in and come out. So I would say that the coverage is better, but we still do get these very silly stories about the celebrities, about Xenu and that kind of thing. And I understand why people would write about that kind of stuff. But I do think that the more important subject does get covered.
I just can't believe that the probable criminal elements within it are not covered in bombshell stories that lead to arrests. I mean, you saw it with the Miami Herald's, the reason that like Epstein got arrested because they did a story on it. They went through and dug it. I don't know why that hasn't happened yet here.
It's very, we get asked that a lot. Where's the FBI? Where's the Department of Justice? And what law enforcement will often say is that, remember we were talking earlier about these Scientologists, they come out, it takes them 10 years just to recover. And so by the time they speak up and say, you know what, I was extorted, I was ripped off, I was abused, it's too late for law enforcement to do something. So it's been difficult to get that information. Also, I think the fact that there's only 20,000 active Scientologists in the world has something to do with it. It's like, the law enforcement, unfortunately, may feel that it's just not as big of a problem as that they want to do. Obviously, the thing that everyone would like to see is the IRS to revisit this idea that it is a legitimate religious organization that deserves tax exemption. When is the IRS going to take another look at that? And Mike Rinder once explained something to me. I think it makes a lot of sense. He says, yeah, of course, there's lots of evidence that Scientology is in violation of its agreements, and that if the IRS reviewed this, that there would be lots of reasons to take that tax exempt status away. Right. The problem is you're that mid-level manager in whatever agency you're in, and you're going to recommend to your boss that we do this, we open the investigation, we do what we need to do. You have to make a decision. Are you ready for that to be the rest of your career? Because Scientology's money and its attorneys are going to fight you every step of the way. And it's not that there's not evidence of wrongdoing. It's not that they don't, that law enforcement isn't interested, because I've talked to people. They are very interested. It's that they know Scientology's reputation for fighting every step of the way. And I think it's what keeps governments from doing what they should do.
Yeah, but they're like a, whatever it is, I forget the number Mark had. Maybe it's like $2 billion, might have been less than that, but $2 billion organization, that's obviously a lot of money to you and me. But when has it ever stopped the government from using taxpayer money to fucking spend on shit? Like, okay, so they're going to spend like $500 million to have every agency involved. Like, all right, go ahead. As a taxpayer, I'm like, knock yourself the fuck out, boys.
I know. You're right. You're absolutely right. And they should and they could. But I think, look, let's look at history with IRS. They had tax exempt status in the 60s. They lost it in 1967 because the IRS decided that too much money was going to L. Ron Hubbard. They didn't have tax exempt status for the next 25 years, but Scientology still didn't pay a penny in taxes. That bill was to the point Marty Rathman once said they had $1 billion tax bill that they were never going to be able to pay. The only option for them was to attack the IRS until the IRS cried uncle. Now, what other organization in the world would think that that's that's the way to go? To literally, everyone thinks that the IRS is a bully. Scientology outbullied them.
That's crazy.
Scientology just like investigated individual IRS people, sued them with countless lawsuits until finally in 1991, IRS cried uncle, and they did a 2-year process, a formal process, and gave them tax exempt status in October 1993. And it's very clear. The only reason the IRS did that was they wanted Scientology to stop all the harassment. Now, who in the IRS today is ready to go through that again? That's the problem.
I don't know, maybe one of the 86,000 armed agents they hired, like someone in there. I get it. Like they're torturing these people in their personal lives. I understand that sucks, but like you're the government.
I know.
Take the head off the snake. They won't be doing shit to you.
I know.
Like if they came up with criminal cases against the top 10, 15 people at Scientology, it's over. There's no, they wouldn't even know how to harass you. I mean, in my opinion, from the outside, tell me if I'm wrong, but like they wouldn't even know how to harass you at that point. All the people who told them what to do forever are gone.
I absolutely agree. And it's so frustrating that the government hasn't done something. And look at what's going on in the courts now. People can't even sue them. Various ex-Scientologists have brought lawsuits against Scientology in the last 15 years. And Scientology has this incredible strategy that is working for them. Whenever you do anything in Scientology, whether you go to work for them, whether you get some auditing, whether you go through their detox thing, you have to sign a waiver. And in that waiver, there's some language that says you promise never to sue us. And if you do have a problem, you will go through our internal justice system.
Oh, they have an internal system.
Which they call religious arbitration. And so, people sign, oh yeah, whatever, let me get in the sauna. Oh yeah, I'll sign that, whatever, give me the e-meter. So years later, they realize they've been abused. They come out and they say, I'm going to sue Scientology. And the first thing Scientology does, they go into court and say, no, you signed this agreement. And you have to understand the way arbitration is supposed to work is let's say that the guy who made your roof did a bad job, or so the guy that worked in your teeth did a bad job, and you decide to sue them. They may bring out a thing saying, no, you cited an arbitration thing. Okay, fine. So you go to independent arbitration, which means some retired judge gets brought in, both sides get heard, and you're maybe just as likely to win there as you would in a lawsuit. The reason why the company wants it to be arbitration, though, is that it's done out of the public eye. Okay. Well, that's not what Scientology is doing. Scientology has it completely rigged, where the people who are on the arbitrating panel have to be Scientologists in good standing. You're never going to get a fair hearing. Exactly. And yet these judges keep signing off on it. Judges keep kicking these lawsuits out of court saying, you signed a contract. Contract's a contract. So not only is it frustrating that the government, through its law enforcement agencies, isn't doing something about Scientology's abuses, these ex-Scientologists are having the hardest time suing Scientology over it. I just don't think American courts, American government are set up to deal with an organization that deals in nothing but bad faith.
It's difficult, though, when the organizations, and again, you have a point, and I hear it. I just come back to it. Like, it's difficult to take that when the organization is as small in numbers as it is. Like, if you're talking about, like, the Vatican, all right, yeah, you got it. You're not going to stop that. But, like, we're talking about,
I have wondered if the government is basically waiting for it to shrink to a certain level and then move in, because then it'll be a little easier to knock over. I've thought about that. I've wondered about that.
Well, if they wait long enough, someone taller than Miscavige will be there. It'll be harder to knock over. Really tough. But we keep talking about Rinder, Mike Rinder, who I know is a friend of yours. Yeah. Mike, really good guy. When I've talked with him, he was on my friend Danny Jones's podcast a few years ago, and he was supposed to come on here. I hope we can do that again in the future. We weren't able to get that done, but I talked about him a bit with Mark Bunker. But for people who haven't heard that podcast, can you just give the brief background on Mike Rinder's role in Scientology and how he came up through it?
Yeah, in 2009. Between 2007 and 2009, there was a little mini exodus of high-level Scientology executives that all got together and talked to the Tampa Bay Times for this incredible series that should have won a Pulitzer in 2009 called The Truth Rundown. And Mike was one of those. It was an amazing moment, and I think that's part of what changed this press approach that I've talked about, where the press is starting to take these abuses more seriously, thanks to Mike Rinder and Mark and Claire Headley, Jefferson Hawkins, Amy Scobie, these people that all came out at one time. Mike is particularly interesting among those because he was not only, second or third highest ranking Scientologist in the whole thing, but he was specifically in charge of that spy wing, the Office of Special Affairs.
Yes.
And so he knows exactly how David Miscavige deals with enemies and that kind of thing. He wrote an amazing book. It's called A Billion Years, and it came out a year and a half ago, I think. Incredible book. Because he was in all the places that things were happening over the last 30 years. And it's just an incredible, I encourage you to get that. Really well told. I can't believe how much Scientology history he got into that one book. And it's a very personal book. He opens it by talking about the fact that he's lost his adult children, that he'll never get back because they stayed in Scientology.
Oh, they stayed.
They stayed, and they denounce him, and Scientology uses them in videos against him. It's really just really disgusting. And he started a new family now. He's got a wonderful new family, and he's had health problems. We're all rooting for him. He's got cancer, and he's been doing really, really well with it.
That's public.
Yeah. He's talked about that, and it's we're all really concerned about him. But he looks great. He's doing great. He and I actually both fought cancer at the same time. I had a much less serious thing that he did, and but it was kind of funny that we were both going through it at the same time. But he's He's an amazing guy, and he has really become one of Dave Miscavige's biggest nightmares. And he's worked very closely with law enforcement. He's told the FBI everything he knows. I just think,
like, they came to him or he went to them.
He went to them and turned over documents and told them everything. And like I said, at one point in 2010. Scientology FBI was very close to raiding the base. They decided not to. Later, I managed, another journalist actually got it and shared it with me, a very friendly gesture, shared with me the actual FBI report. And Mike Rinder's interview is in there, along with Amy's and Mark and Claire. I mean, you can read now what they were all told the FBI.
And why again did they not do that? I think you mentioned that earlier.
Well, no, I haven't. That's a really complex question. I think Scientology they have people in power. They have people who will go to the Department of Justice and complain personally. What happened was there's this character named Tommy Davis. He was the spokesman for the Church of Scientology, and he's the son of Ann Archer, the actress. God, how does this all go down? So at one point, when John Brousseau left Scientology, Tommy Davis was part of that blow drill, and they went to Texas to try to talk John Brousseau into coming back. And then later in Mark and Claire Headley's lawsuit, they asked Tommy Davis in a deposition, "Isn't it true that you guys will go follow people?" And oh no, we never do that. Mm-hmm. Now, that thing he had done in Texas was in a police report, but it was private because it was part of an ongoing investigation. The FBI agent who was the chief agent in the Scientology investigation where they were thinking about raiding the base, knew that this document of Tommy Davis showing up in Texas would help impeach him in Mark Headley's lawsuit, where he had said that he doesn't do that kind of thing. Oh. And so the FBI agent gave that police report to Mark and Claire's attorney to use in their case. And when they went into court and said, "Look, we got proof, we've got documented proof that Tommy Davis is lying about not taking part in these blow drills. He just took part in one in Texas." The Scientology attorneys freaked out and said, "Where do you have that document? You shouldn't have that document." See, they knew about the document. They didn't think the Headleys could get it. "You shouldn't have that." They put two and two together, went to the Department of Justice and said, "Listen, your FBI agent did something improper. Your FBI agent helped out a private lawsuit and busted her, and the whole investigation went down the tubes."
Oh, my God.
No. I'm the only one that wrote that story.
So can they ever use any of that, or that's just...
Well, I mean, the FBI investigation is all on the record. I published that whole investigation.
But in a future investigation that they were able to build, can they even cite anything they did there because it's now tainted?
They can cite it, but I mean, it's old now, so I don't know how useful it would be. But, an FBI agent realizing that Mark and Claire Headley were being... that their judge was being lied to by Scientology, and just felt personally, I can do something, and did something to help, ended up torpedoing the whole investigation.
Sucks.
Yeah.
And you wrote about that back then?
Yeah. No, I wrote about it, let's see, that I want to say 2014, something like that.
Okay, so a few years after.
Yeah.
So they weren't able to go. Now, this is after the 07-09 Tampa series that Rinder and other guys were being
so that group of people came out between 2007 2009. They went to the Tampa Bay Times. That came out in 2009. Truth Rundown. That helped produce, and then the Anderson Cooper on CNN then did his series based on that Tampa Bay series.
Oh,
and then that's what prompted the FBI then to get serious about their investigation in 2010. But then it got torpedoed.
Okay, so Mike had left Scientology before he was given those interviews.
Right.
In like 07?
Mike escaped on a London street in 2007.
What went down? What do you mean on a London street?
You have to read his book. He was, he knew he was going to be punished. He was in big trouble again. You get into trouble for no reason. He knew he was going to be in trouble again. He was in London doing something for them, and he just said, screw it, and just went for the train, got on a train, got the heck out.
Was he with Scientology people, and he just
I think he was on his own, and he just took off. But he knew that he was. It was like you got to go all the way. You can't just do it. You know what I'm saying? And he just took off with what he had with him.
It's so strange that, like, that's the story. It's just a regular middle-aged man walking in the middle of a London street. He's got no one with him except, like, the dude eating at a cafe right there and someone else getting their dry cleaning done. It's broad daylight, and he's like, I'm going to get on this 11:12 train that departs for the next stop, and that's going to be my getaway.
Yeah.
There's no, it's like a ghost is chasing you. It's like this ghost in your, it's not like in the, like in, no, actually, pun intended, in a Tom Cruise movie where he's jumping on a plane as there's guns coming at him and shit.
Right.
It's just like, I got to get out of this mental bubble, and I'm going to do it by physically walking onto that train right there and sitting down. And yet, maybe he could get 2 stops away and then change his mind and come back and no one knows anything happens. So then he's got to, like, mentally sit in that train wherever the fuck it goes, maybe up to Scotland. I don't know.
Right.
And, like, convince himself to get to a spot, and when he's at the next spot, it's like, okay, well, now what? It's so strange. Like, for guys like you and me to think about this, it's so strange.
It's crazy. But
So
they
what
know the retaliation mechanism. They know how much, you know, people are going to be coming after them. And so, yeah. And they all have different stories about how they got out. It's incredible.
What did he do after that? So the train stopped somewhere. Like, what did he do?
Well, he went to the airport, flew to the U.S. I think he ended up in Denver. Didn't know anybody. He just had to, I think he knew one person.
Ex-Scientologist?
Just got himself a job selling cars, you know, and he was just like, nobody knew he was there. Nobody knew who he was. He was just selling cars.
Oh, so he had just disappeared, and somewhere Miscavige is like, where the fuck did Mike go?
Oh, they've tracked him down.
Well, no, I know, but
see,
like
he
at that
knew
point.
he knew enough that they weren't going to be able to talk him into coming back because he knew how.
Oh, so they had tracked him down to Denver right away.
Yeah.
Okay, but he had been in the hole for a couple years. When was that?
So the hole started in January 2004. And it was started with maybe, 30 or 40 executives in a double-wide trailer there, and they were locked in. They were only let out once a day to go across the street to a place to take showers, and then they were fed slop from a bucket.
Slop from a bucket.
Yeah. Mike was in, I think, 2006, 2007, and then he was pulled out because Miscavige needed him to deal with John Sweeney, the BBC reporter who was doing a special about Scientology then. And what's really amazing, if you watch that first John Sweeney documentary, he did a couple, but if you look at the first one, you look at Rinder in that, he's skeletal, okay, because he's been in the hole for a year, eating almost nothing. Oh man, you can.
So wait, he's in the documentary. So Miscavige wanted him to be one of the guys to respond on the record
because Sweeney was serious. I mean, this is a BBC guy. He needs his big guns. So he pulled.
Can we find that, Alessi? John Sweeney and Mike Rinder.
I've got that picture on my website somewhere, but yeah, put up John Sweeney, Mike Rinder, and search images, and I'll point it out to you. So Mike had been in the hole. And they found out that Sweeney was going to be doing this special, so Miscavige was like, I need you. And he said that happened to a number of people. They'd come into the hole until for some reason Miscavige needs them and then pull them out.
Now, would Miscavige come in himself or he send someone
no,
to get
he'd send somebody.
Yeah, I was going to say.
No, none of those. Scroll down. I think it's black and white, actually. There it is. See the, yeah. That's
Whoa.
Yeah. Compare that to his normal size of his face. That's where he's been in the hole for a year. Okay. And
so they put him back in after this?
No. They pulled him out to deal with Sweeney, and I don't think he went. He may have gone in and out a couple times.
Oh, because he went to London. That's where he ended up escaping.
Then he ended up in London escaping.
So it's like the last.
So that's
did.
like in 2005, I think, or 2006 is when he's dealing with Sweeney.
Can we see if there's something on YouTube of like Rinder addressing Sweeney? I'd love to see this. That's a picture, but try to see if we can pull up a YouTube video. So this was a part of like a series he was doing on BBC.
Special, yeah. So Sweeney did a special in 2007, I want to say. Maybe it was 2005, called, I can't remember what the first one was called. And then after Mike escaped, then they got together to make a second one called Secrets of Scientology, I think. I don't know if the first one is even online anymore.
I remember seeing it on the Netflix. I remember.
Yeah. But anyway, so he made those two. They're great. They're really great.
All right. I don't know if we're going to be able to find it, but
yeah.
I'd love to see that. So this is, he ends up leaving, I guess, after doing this. And goes and gives these stories, I guess, while he's in Denver to the Tampa Bay Times.
So then
people.
in Denver, they tracked him down, and this woman, Monique Yingling, who's a top attorney for the church, kind of threatened him. He was really unhappy with that. So then he got together with these other former top executives, and they talked to the Tampa Bay Times in 2009. And like I said, that really changed a lot of things. And it's really kind of been, there we go.
If I'm just gonna say this, if this is picking up at the end of us watching it, it's because there's Eminem music on it, and that's copyrighted. But if not, let's let this play. Real fast.
Yeah.
John, I didn't realize it was this guy.
Yeah.
John Sweeney was on Danny's show maybe 3-4 years ago.
About Ukraine?
No. He did an unbelievable series on Ghislaine Maxwell.
Oh, okay.
It was a podcast series,
right.
and like the investigation was incredible. I didn't realize he did this too. That was fucking awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
But if people were seeing that on the screen, again, if it skipped and you didn't see a video, we'll put that link in description. I'm just like live editing in my head right now because we may get a copyright thing with the Eminem music that they had there. But like, holy shit. You're not kidding. I mean, he looks like a skeleton.
Yeah.
Rinder.
No, that's what's fun to know is that's right. He had been in the hole. He had been a prisoner. They pulled him out, and then he's arguing with John Sweeney, like, defending Miscavige, the guy that's kept him in prison for months. It's just that's how the mental conditioning is crazy.
Oh my God. So then he got out or whatever, but this is all before Leah got out, right?
Leah defected
Leah,
in 2013. I got to break that news, actually. I got to break in July 2013. I broke the news that Leah Remini had left. How
did you break it?
Let me just say that it had been a process for a while. She was a very dedicated Scientologist. She'd been in Celebrity Center for a long time. And then when Tom and Katie got married in November 2006, it was at a castle in Italy. And Leah was invited, and she went with Jennifer Lopez, her very, very good friend. And when she got there, she was concerned because David Miscavige was there without his wife, Shelly.
Yeah.
And not only was Dave there without Shelly, Dave was playing a little bit of grab ass with his personal communicator by the name of Lou Stuckenbrock.
Like a guy?
No, a woman. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was a little too friendly with his female communicator, it's called. And so, Leah's like, what's going on? And so she started asking, where is Shelly? Why is Dave here without him? And Tommy Davis, the guy you saw in that video, said to her, you don't have the fucking rank to ask that question. Leah was really upset about it. She went back to her hotel room and she wrote up a report. She basically turned in the Pope of Scientology to Scientology. And they didn't like that. So they then ordered her to Florida to do 3 months of conditioning and charged her $300,000 for
now,
it.
what did that
That was 2006, okay?
What did that comprise of?
It's called the Truth Rundown. It's basically they do this auditing to you and mess with your head to the point where you will finally agree that you didn't see what you saw. And she went through all that. And then between 2006 and 2013, she was having doubts. She was, on her way out. Then finally, I found out that she was out completely. July 8th, 2013, I broke that news.
How did you find that out?
I had a source.
Okay. Gotcha.
And my story had that story I wrote in 2013 had it all laid out. The whole Tom Cruise wedding, all the stuff that she had been through, all of which ended up, she wrote her own version of in her own book later called Troublemaker, a great book.
Quick question,
yeah.
Little aside here, because I've been thinking this throughout the day today. Obviously, you have a lot of great sources. Do you have people who are actively still appearing to be in Scientology but have mentally left and they're leaking stories to guys like you?
Sure, of course. I've always had that.
They got to act.
I've always had that. And it's, dicey, and that's why you only hear a fraction of what I learned. Only the stuff I can confirm and that I can confirm with people that I can go public with.
So they know it's crazy. They hate it. They're trying to help stop it, but they have to remain
They
in
have
it.
different motives. Some of the people who leak to me are just really unhappy about Miscavige, but they still feel that Scientology is a good thing, and they
that's
don't like the
interesting.
direction Miscavige is taking it in. Others don't like what it's done to their families. The family's been ripped apart. People have different motivations, and and sometimes, I can get some very sensitive information. It depends, but yeah. So I found out about Leah, broke that news in 2013. She's been out since then, and
So it took her another 6 years after 06.
Yes, yeah.
And they pulled her there for 3 months. Like, did she have to film for King of Queens while that was going on?
That's a great question. I've never asked her that. Whether I guess she wasn't filming something then, 2013. That's well after King of Queens. So
Because, like, Tom, and I think it's actually, I think it's her I've heard talk about this. If I'm misremembering who talked about it, I'm sorry. It's someone else mentioned in the comments. But Tom, when he goes to set, like his assistant is a Scientologist, the person who helps the assistant is a Scientologist, some of the people on set are sure to be Scientologists, and they they make him feel in charge, but he's like babysat on every set. Was it similar for her?
She has said, and it's in her book, I believe, that when they were filming King of Queens, that's a pretty grueling schedule.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Right? 5 days a week, whatever. She was going to the Celebrity Center every night
Yeah, I heard her say that.
that
yeah.
they were filming. That's how dedicated she was.
And where was the Celebrity Center?
Well, the Hollywood Celebrity Center on Franklin in LA. Yeah. So she was very dedicated, and you can tell she's really doesn't like how she got treated, and she's feels betrayed by David Miscavige and Scientology. She's very fortunate that her mother came out with her, and they were not able to split them apart like so many other families.
Is her dad still in it?
No, her biological father, I don't think ever was involved. Her stepfather came out. Her stepfather came out with them.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
But she grew up in it because they joined it, right? The mom and the
The
stepfather?
mom, yeah.
God, that's so hard. I mean, like, that's the thing. Especially when obviously she's a star now because Scientology helped her. But, like, when you see kids get sucked into this, it's hard to judge them as an adult because it's like they don't know anything else.
Yeah, no, I know it can be bewildering to leave Scientology and try to adapt to a world that they don't really know very well. It can be very difficult for some of them, and some of them thrive. Like Mark and Claire Headley are amazing. They came out and created businesses, and they're just they couldn't have children in the Sea Org, so they made up for it afterwards and had 4 boys. 3 or 4. I hope I got them right. Anyway, and they have businesses. They're doing so great. But I know other people that left the Sea Org that have not thrived. It's been very difficult for them. And it can be difficult to adapt to the modern world and things.
Wait, why adapt to the modern world?
There are people that come out of Scientology without driver's licenses, without any idea of what insurance is.
But it's not like they live. Most of them don't live on the
Some
cruise
of them don't
ship.
have birth certificates.
What?
Yeah.
How is that possible? Because they were born into it?
Yeah.
And they have like a Scientology doctor on deck that fucking...
I mean, I talked to a guy that signed his first Sea Org contract with a crayon when he was 5 years old.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's criminal.
It is.
That's child labor.
I know. Now they're a little more careful about that now because
Well,
of all the exposés and people who've come out. I think they're a little more careful about that now, but they're still abusing people, no question.
See, that's so, oh my God. I don't know why they don't just kick down the doors. So literally though, like to go back to that point, they'll have like a OBGYN who's a Scientologist deliver a baby and not...
I just know that I've talked to Scientologists that have come out and said it's so hard because they don't have copies of anything. If there is a birth certificate, they can't, they don't know how to get it. They don't have driver's license. They've never had a bank account in their lives. And
no bank account.
No. Why would you have a bank account if you're a Sea Org member? Scientology takes, they put you up in housing. You never leave the base. You have a little cash on you, buy a few things.
Is this the base in Clearwater, you're saying?
The base in Clearwater, the base in California. Yeah.
So you don't, but there are a lot of people in Scientology who live out in the regular world.
Yeah. Oh no, there's plenty of public Scientologists
Yes.
that are online like the rest of us. They're on Facebook like
Right.
the rest of us. They have regular jobs, no question.
But those people talk with the Sea Org people when
Yep.
they're doing their little Scientology thing, and those Sea Org people never say, well, wait, I want a Facebook.
No, because you got to understand the mentality. They literally think they're saving the planet.
What?
Yeah. They
How?
think they think that this is a prison planet, that we're unaware of it, and that only Scientologists can solve it. I mean, once you buy into the idea that Scientology is the only real thing that happens, then you disregard what's going on in the rest of the world.
And they're saving it.
Yeah. They say they're clearing the planet, which is basically making Scientology, the world safe for Scientology. But they do talk about planetary salvation. They use that phrase all the time.
And how did our good friend L. Ron Hubbard, who you're such a big fan of, how did he define planetary salvation?
Well, the way he would describe it is he would say that once you have a certain critical mass of Scientologists, you'll literally be able to write the laws and take over. I mean, they are talking about planetary takeover. I mean, it's pitiful because they only have 20,000 people. It's not going to happen. But they do. That's their aim, is to literally take over.
Have they ever looked at like taking over a small country in need of cash?
Yeah. In fact, in 1966, Hubbard wanted to take over Rhodesia.
Oh my God. Okay. What happened there?
They kicked him out.
Can we pull up Rhodesia?
I don't know how you spell
Well,
that.
it's called Zimbabwe now.
Yeah, but the original map before it was Zimbabwe. I want to see because does it have a different? Was it smaller back then, or is it the same?
I think it's the same
borders?
size. It just changed name.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he tried to. This sounds like Matt Cox's very short billionaire.
In the 50s.
What's it called? Schizophrenic friend. What's his name? Frank Amadeo.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take over this country.
Yeah.
See, that's not that small.
No, it's not. It's in the 50s, he was in America. In the 60s, he was in England. But then even that got hot for him. So in 66, he went to Rhodesia.
And he wanted to take it over.
He wanted to become prime minister. He got kicked out. So then what's left for him, right? He takes to sea. And so from 1967 to 1975, he ran Scientology from a ship in the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, and the Caribbean. It was called the Apollo.
And were they able to get away with like international sea laws for some things with that?
Well,
Or-
absolutely, because I mean that was the point. Was not they kept running out of ports because once a country got smart about what they were really all about, they'd kick them out. So they were getting fewer and fewer ports they could go to. But they were really hot with Greece for a while. They were in Morocco for a while. They finally ended up in the Caribbean, and by that time, Hubbard was tired of running Scientology from a ship, and so they went back to land in Florida in 1975, and that's when they began their secret takeover of Clearwater.
Aptly named town.
Yeah, exactly.
And can you define the whole concept of going clear for people out there who
Well,
aren't familiar?
I mean, initially, if you read Dianetics, the book that started it all, and it's very important that the full title is Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health. Initially, Hubbard pitched this as a science, not as a religion. And his idea was
They're kind
that
of the same thing
he
these
was
days.
he was the first one, he claimed, to discover the true nature of the human mind, which is that it had two halves. The one thing is called the analytical mind, which is our waking mind, and it's really an incredibly powerful tool, except that it's held back by the other half, which is called our reactive mind, which takes over when we're unconscious and stores all of our traumatic memories. So if through what he called Dianetics, which was this talking cure, if you could talk about your traumas, you would erase the reactive mind. And then you become this perfect, very improved person with higher IQ and perfect recall. That was always the goal. And he called that state clear. So if you went and when he initially pitched this with Dianetics in 1950, he was talking about maybe 20 or 100 hours of this Dianetic counseling, and you could go clear. And it was a very popular idea. It was very popular for the first year or so. He went broke then. and had to start over again. He had lost the use of the word Dianetics, and so he came up with the word Scientology. And the difference was in Scientology, you weren't just in Dianetics, you were going back to the womb. What was it like when you were born and before, to try to remember the traumatic incidents that were stored in your reactive mind. And so it was very popular to try to go back and remember what you were like as a fetus.
Oh, Terrence Howard can do it, apparently.
But then Scientology goes back farther. And the idea is you're going back to previous lives, what it was like hundreds, thousands, millions, and billions of years ago. So what all Scientologists do then is they go through these various training routines to still their mind, basically, and be able to do these exercises. And then they go through what's called the grades. And what they don't realize is going on is it's all confessional. You're always being asked to talk about the things you did as a kid, terrible things you've done in your life. They're writing it all down. They're building a file on you. And then finally you go clear. And originally that was the whole goal. It's just let's go clear, become almost superhuman. But then in the 60s, he started adding things beyond clear. The OT levels, the operating Thetan levels. So today, clear is just an intermediate goal. It's still very important to Scientologists, but it's only an intermediate goal.
And that was effectively, though, he was making it up completely as he went along. And so once the book had kind of served its purpose and now he invents the term Scientology, were there other, like, did he consult with anyone, like, senior leadership, if you will, in his organization, some of whom would have then been like, wait a second, this guy's just fucking making it up?
That's a great question. Initially he was, to a certain extent, willing to listen to some of the early people, as far as maybe there were some, so-and-so in Johannesburg figured out a really cool way to do this. Oh yeah, let's add that. He would allow a certain amount of additions from other people, but over time it's just Hubbard. Everything has to come from Hubbard. Hubbard defines every single part of the entire bridge, and he would send out these bulletins after bulletins after bulletins all over the world. You have to do it this way. To this day, they talk about delivering standard tech standardly. And it's called Keeping Scientology Working. It's one of their most important policies, that the only way that you can do Scientology is to do it the way Ron described it and codified it. You cannot do it any other way. So there was a little bit of collaboration early on, but it got stamped out, and it's just all Ron now.
So the idea is 100 years from now, they're going to be using a soapbox with an electrical current on it and saying it's new technology.
Well, that's why Scientology was so late to the internet. That's why Scientology was so late to so many other technologies, is that they are still stuck in the 50s in a lot of ways.
Yeah, their promo videos are too. They're hilarious. Oh my God. Those things, they're so, like, they look like a South Park episode. That's probably the least amount of work Trey Parker and Matt Stone ever had to do when they sit in a room and go, okay, how can we make this thing ridiculous? There's no work to be done. It's just like, all right, let's just present it and make it a cartoon. We're good. We got it. I mean, it's just, again, it's hard to wrap my head around it. But Leah was not, she never met Hubbard, right? He would have.
No, I don't think Leah Remini ever met Hubbard. He was very scarce after 78, and after 75 he was very scarce, and he was in complete hiding after 1980. After 1980, there were basically only 2 or 3 people in the world that knew where he was and were spending time with him.
But when he was still alive, she was a kid in Scientology, right? At some point?
Let's see. I got to do the math.
Can we pull up when she's born?
She's 53 now, and so she was born in
71, maybe? 70, 71?
71, and she got into it when she was about 6 years old. So we figure she got into it when she was about 77.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was still around, but I don't think she would have seen him.
But does she remember how he was spoken about at that point? Because he's still alive, right? So he's like a living god.
I've never asked her about that. I mean, all Scientologists will tell you that he's not a god. We just hold him in very high esteem, but they worship the guy. They definitely worship the guy.
Okay. Now, she took 7 years, give or take, 6-7 years after that 3-month period in 2006, where they made her come in and spend $300,000 for the right to be brain tortured. Why did it? What was her process that took that much longer for her to leave?
She was concerned about what had happened to Shelly. She hadn't heard anything about Shelly. She kept asking Dave about that. She wasn't getting good answers. She was starting to threaten to go to the FBI against, to Dave.
While still in.
And there was just, I think she just reached a point where she's like, I'm out of here. And then she told a very few people, and then it got to me, and then I reported that she was out. So that was July 2013.
What was it like for her when she left, though? Because she's a public figure. They obviously know she left. Like, what did they do?
I think she was very nervous about it. I think she wasn't sure how much they were going to retaliate, but I think she was angry because a month later, in August 2013, is when she filed a missing person report on Shelly with the LAPD. This was huge. I mean,
yeah. Can you explain? Because she was later found, but recently, like they found her in the last year, right?
No, they didn't find her.
Oh, they didn't.
No, I mean,
All
look.
right, fill me in.
So Dave and Shelly were both messengers, those young helpers of L. Ron Hubbard, and they got married in I think 81, something like that. And they were around Hubbard, and so when Dave took over after Hubbard's death, she was, he eventually adopted the title COB, which stands for Chairman of the Board. So everybody in Scientology, they don't call him Miscavige, they call him COB. Shelly's title was literally COB assistant. Okay, so the two of them ran Scientology. Mostly they were at that int base east of Los Angeles that we were looking at before. They had some nice quarters there. And but after about 2002, 2003, when they started to get Tom Cruise really spun up again, and Dave was spending a lot of time with Tom Cruise, the relationship with Shelly started to get strained. And at some point in, I believe, late August, so then in 2005, what happened in 2005 was that Tom Cruise had his disastrous interview with Matt Lauer. He had his weird appearance on Oprah.
Oh, the couch.
At about the same time, in early 2005, Dave left the base to go to L.A. to work on this new project. They were going to republish all of L. Ron Hubbard's books. Mike Rinder was working on it in L.A. Dave came out to work on it. And the people that were there told me it was very unusual that Dave went to L.A. and Shelly stayed behind. They normally went everywhere together. That was the first sign that something was going on. Then Mike came back to the base on his own. Shelly cornered him. And he said she cornered him on a particular balcony on a particular building. And he said that was important because he knew it was one of the very few places on that entire base that wasn't on a cam. Okay? So he knew she was cornering him somewhere where they would really have some privacy. And Mike said that she said to him, "Oh, you were with Dave in L.A. Let me ask you, which colored ring was he wearing?" Now they had bought these elaborate wedding rings that were like multiply colored, like there was rose gold and silver, whatever. And so she was asking him, "Did you happen to notice which of his rings he was wearing?" Mike says to me, "I know what she was really asking. She was really asking, was he wearing his wedding ring?" And that's when Mike told me, that's when I knew there was something really going on, some problem. So Dave was on his own in L.A. and Shelly was wondering about his wedding ring. So just a few weeks after that, in late August or early September 2005, I've never gotten the exact date. I've talked to people that were there though.
This is when Mike's in the hole now, right?
No, Mike's not in the hole yet. No, Mike's not in the hole till the next year.
Okay.
The hole is there, but Mike wasn't in it yet.
He wasn't in it.
Dave comes now. While Dave's gone, one of the things he was notorious for was there were certain things that never got done because you had to get his permission, and he would send it back a million times. And so there was like this, we call it an org board, and it's basically a jobs board. Who goes into what position? And they could never get it filled out. So while Dave was in L.A., Shelly filled it out Here, you work there, done. Everyone was so happy, right? The other thing that they did was they wanted to renovate the building that they were staying in, and so Shelly oversaw the crating up of all their possessions, get everything out of the way so they can work on the house. Dave comes back. He sees that the org board's been filled in without his permission. He sees that his belongings are all in boxes, and he blows his top. I've got multiple witnesses to this. He just, as the mother of all temper tantrums, a week later, Shelly disappeared and has not been seen in 19 years.
I thought they did find her. I must have missed that. So she's never been seen since then.
There have been sightings. But I really do.
What do you mean a sighting? Because that would be seen.
Well, sightings meaning unconfirmed. Sighting. Okay, she's been
like
seen. She's been seen. Well, let me explain what I think happened. Okay, that base we're talking about, Int Base or Gold Base, where the hole is, 500-acre massive complex in San Jacinto, east of Los Angeles. There's a smaller base up in the mountains above there called CST, Church of Spiritual Technology. That's the most secret subsidiary of Scientology. CST is the very secretive group that operates the vaults. Do you know about the vaults?
No.
They have vaults. They have 4 vaults. One there in the CST headquarters near Lake Arrowhead. There's one farther up in Northern California in the what do you call it, Gold Country. There's a mine, and then way extreme Northern California, a place called Petrolia, and a 4th vault in New Mexico. And it's basically an underground vault where they can store L. Ron Hubbard's writings and lectures so that when there's civilization collapse, Scientology can get things going again.
Oh, that's what we'll find?
Yes,
oh my
right,
God. Pray for that civilization.
So there's one organization that's their whole job, CST, archiving L. Ron Hubbard's things. I believe Dave, for whatever reason, was done with her and had her shipped up to the CST headquarters near Lake Arrowhead, and she's been there ever since. Now, what you might
be... As a prisoner.
Basically as a prisoner.
Not dead.
No, I don't think she's dead. I think we'd find out if she was dead.
Well, how would we find out if there's no body, no crime?
No, but there would be records. And I think about...
why would there be records if she's never been recovered?
There are public records putting her there. Okay, and if she dies, it will become public eventually. It may take a little while. A parallel, they had a woman named Pat. Remember Pat Broker? We talked about him. His wife was Annie Broker. Her name was Annie Tidman. She eventually was kind of put away and died, and it took
put away.
They hid her away in an apartment while she was dying of cancer.
Oh.
She died, and then it took a while before her family heard about it. Her family then told me, and then I was able to write a story about it. It was about 6 months between the time she died and the time I was able to write a story about it. I think something like that would happen with Shelly. I think we would hear something if she had died. But anyway, you may have seen the news that recently there was a record of her getting a new driver's license and voting record up at the Petrolia location in Northern California. I think she was there for a short time and had her driver's license renewed, but I think most likely she's still where she's been the whole time, which is the CST headquarters near Lake Arrowhead. It's the most secure place for them to be able to put her. She actually has work that she can do there, and I think he's going to keep her there till she dies.
All right, let's read this. So the article here is... What's the story with that place, the underground Scientology vault near Petrolia? There's a picture on the screen. Can you zoom in on that for 1 second, Les, just for people out there?
That's the vault near Petrolia I'm talking about, and that's the one where recently a voter's record showed up for Shelly. I do believe she was there for a short time. I doubt that she's still there.
Tony, what am I looking at there?
So that's the vault entrance. So that strangely looking triangular pentagonal building is actually the entrance to the vault. The vault goes back underneath the ground there. Probably doesn't go too far, a couple 100 feet. And it's basically what they do is they get a big giant corrugated metal pipe and bury it and then build inside of it.
Like rooms, like holes, if you will?
All it is a storage room for L. Ron Hubbard's bullshit.
And fucking Shelly's just back there in the storage room.
No, there's other buildings around there. She would be staying in a house nearby. She would not be in the vault.
Not in the vault. Well,
No.
how nice of them. They let her see some daylight.
Yes.
Okay, so
There's up the road a little ways or a mile or so. There's a very nice house. She was probably staying there for a while. Like I said, I doubt that she's still there because there's only 2 people up there.
What is that? What's that Venn diagram?
Right. So that's the symbol for CST, that particular subsidiary that runs those vaults. There's only one person who ever worked for CST that came out and spoke about it. His name is Dylan Gill. I interviewed him 12 years ago, and I've interviewed him since then. I asked him about that, and it's interesting. He initially said to me, they do that so that when L. Ron Hubbard returns to Earth, he'll be able to see that.
Oh, no.
I printed that,
God.
and then he was like, Tony, that's not true. I didn't say that. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you, Dylan. I think you did. So I don't know but that's definitely the logo of the organization that runs those vaults.
All right, go up, Alessi. I just want to read the beginning of this. Just pause that for a sec. Go up. All right, so if you were driving along the Lost Coast a few miles northwest of Petrolia, you might notice an old farm road leading east up a ravine. If you were somehow able to get past the locked cattle gate and follow that farm road through the cow pastures, then up a private road that traces the hill's spine, you'd soon come to a massive symbol carved into the earth. You probably wouldn't even notice its ridges and depressions from ground level. They've eroded quite a bit since a local contractor carved them nearly 30 years ago. But from directly above the perspective of a drone or a Google satellite, you can still see the design. 2 interlocking circles, each more than 500 feet in diameter, with diamonds in the middle. And then that's the picture we were just showing you how it looked. This is the logo for the Church of Spiritual Technology, an arm of Scientology, that's CST like you were saying, created in the early 1980s after the IRS revoked the group's tax-exempt status. It took an all-out war with the IRS for Scientology to regain tax-exempt status, which it finally did in 1993. The CST, an especially secretive branch of the notoriously insular organization, was founded to preserve the life's work of Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard. Just east of the 1,000-foot logo, there's a helipad, and beyond that, an 8,000-square-foot residence called the LRH House,
Yep.
built in 1991, which where Shelly may be, as a place for Hubbard to grow up after being reborn in a new body. Scientologists believe that Hubbard didn't die of a stroke in 1986 at the age of 74, but rather
Voluntarily left his body. That's right. Yeah.
voluntarily discarded his body so he could continue his spiritual research outside of its confines.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
I know, it's amazing. So there have been some sightings. A man named Mitch Brisker definitely saw Shelly. And let's see, that would have been, I think, 2008. He thinks it was. So a few years after she first disappeared, she was with some people. I have spoken to a woman near that CST base in Lake Arrowhead who believes she saw Shelly in a store with a couple of handlers in 2015, 2016. But other than that, nothing confirmed. And but now we get this tantalizing clue of the voter record up at Petrolia, and so there's no question she was there at some point. But I think she's probably back at CST near Lake Arrowhead. But whenever Scientology's put on, basically what's going on is Dave became paranoid about his own wife and decided to just put her away and banish her until she dies. And when you ask Scientology about it, they say, "Oh, she's on a special work project."
A special work project.
Yeah,
that sounds.
And
like...
she doesn't want to speak publicly. But why can't she see her own family? I mean, it's terrible.
Is there like a right to privacy and free speech thing? Seriously, with that, where like the feds can't go and say, "Show us where your wife is," because she has a right to privacy, I guess, right?
The police can go in for a welfare check. But they have been so cowed by Scientology. At one point, when Leah Remini filed her missing person report in 2013, we found out later, thanks to the reporting of Yashar Ali, that the LAPD did meet with Shelly because of Leah's report. They met down the mountain in a coffee shop in Covina. And she was with Dave's attorney. And then there was a strange problem with their fingerprints. Their fingerprints turned out not to be a match. Some people, say that they obviously brought a different woman. No, I think they did.
Did they
bring
have a
Shelly.
criminal record of her for her fingerprints?
She has no criminal record. But they
so how would they even know?
They had from a driver's license. California, you have to give a.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But I just think it was they were too hasty on taking the fingerprint. It's just a bad fingerprint. But I think it was her. But it was just surprising new information that came out about a year and a half ago. But I still really believe that she's alive and she's at CST, probably at the headquarters in Lake Arrowhead. She definitely was up at the one at Petrolia. But this is amazing that the leader of this multinational, multi-billion organization can get away with just banishing his own wife.
Well, you had mentioned that Leah said at the wedding she saw Dave playing footsie with his assistant or whatever.
Right.
But is there, that's a long time ago now. Is there evidence in the meantime that over the last decade and a half he's been fucking like a porn star or anything like that?
The only thing I have is that in 2017, Mitch Brisker says that Mitch Brisker was like the film director for Scientology. He made all their movies for a while.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'd never admit that out loud.
Yeah.
But okay.
And he came out recently. He told some very interesting stories. He came out with a book. I wrote about his book. Very good. And he says that in 2017, they were going to fly over to England for that event I've been talking about, the IS. And he was invited, do you want to go on the plane with us? Private plane would be a lot more, convenient. He said, okay. So he got on a private plane and they flew from LA over to England. And he said that Dave and Lou, his communicator, were in the private cabin with the door closed overnight. So, and he has pointed out that's a violation of Sea Org rules for David Miscavige to be in a private room overnight with a woman that's not his wife.
So they do have rules on that?
I'm not saying anything. I'm not going to try to be the moral police here. But Mitch Brisker is saying that is a violation of Sea Org rules.
So they have like some similar adultery type.
But this idea that Dave and Lou are an item certainly is bolstered by this 2017 event that Mitch Brisker saw, and that's 12 years after Shelly's disappearance. Now it's 7 years ago. I don't know if it's still the case now, but I mean that does suggest that part of the reason that he got rid of Shelly was he wanted to be with somebody else.
Have you ever talked in any way or had any form of communication with David Miscavige at any point in your time reporting? Like, have you ever been in a room with him?
No. He's only given 4 interviews ever since 1986. He was live on Nightline with Ted Koppel in 1992. He gave a more canned interview with NBC a couple years later. Some of that showed up in Going Clear. He gave a print interview. We just found this. We just learned this a couple weeks ago. He gave a print interview to an Austrian news weekly in 1994. And then he gave a print interview to the Tampa Bay Times in 1998. And that's it. He doesn't let reporters anywhere near him. And I send requests for comment to the one media person who's ever responded to me ever, but hasn't in years. I always send requests for comment there, and I get nothing back.
Can we pull up that Ted Koppel one? You said the second one was the one where he was more canned. The first one was
live with Ted Koppel on Nightline. It was kind of a disaster for him, so he's never done that again.
Ted Koppel.
David Miscavige.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Let's pull this up for a second, play it. All right, here we go.
They did some canned pieces about what Scientology is.
The script tells the evaluators to sell hard. The more resistive, meaning resistant, or argumentative he is, the...
In fact, when we come back, we'll be bringing you part 2 of Forrest Sawyer's report and the first...
Here we go.
What exactly does the Church of Scientology believe, and what can happen to those who criticize those beliefs? Once again, here's Nightline correspondent Forrest Sawyer.
I've slept with
he was really upset about these canned pieces.
hunted with
Here's L. Ron Hubbard.
pygmies in the Philippines. As a matter of fact, I have studied 21 different primitive races, including the white race.
Scientology's founder was a man with an imagination. L. Ron Hubbard wrote pulp science fiction for a penny a word, and critics claim manufactured his own life history as well. He called himself an explorer and a war hero, the man who discovered the keys to the universe and used them to heal his own war injuries. Critics say Hubbard's
Heal his
claims
own
were so
war
fanciful
injuries.
that one California Superior Court judge declared Hubbard to be, quote, virtually a pathological liar.
These are a bunch of people who never caused anything in their lives to begin
This is
with.
a guy that
I
has
would
spent
say are
like
jealous
a
of
dozen
man
years in the hole,
who brought
and
a
nobody.
technology
He's going to die
revolution
in
to this world, the like
at the
of which
base.
has never been seen before. And it
Oh, he's
works.
still in.
In 1950, Hubbard turned away from pulp novels with a new book that would change everything.
Do we have the? I thought I saw David Miscavige coming on. Do we know where that is?
Yeah, just scroll forward.
Yeah, scroll forward a less.
Get past the packages, and you'll get to.
Well, use your scroll on the actual video.
No, on the video. Just move it forward.
Yeah. Let's see where this is. No, like use your scroller. Use the. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. All right,
down.
keep looking.
Well, I'm just saying, look at the chapters. I can go to the chapters here.
All right,
Well,
do we
whatever,
see
just
him?
get it forward.
Yeah, grab L.
There we go.
Joining us live tonight is David Miscavige, whose formal title is Chairman of the Board of the Religious
Here he is.
Technology Center, the organization which manages Dianetics and Scientology.
He is
Mr. Miscavige took
32
over as
here.
the head of Scientology in 1987 following the
Looks like
death of
such
the
a creep.
church's founder, L. Ron Hubbard. You've been sitting here very patiently for the first 15 minutes. It's your turn. We're going to take a short segment here to talk, and then we'll take a break, and then we've got the rest of the program to talk. Where would you like to pick up on what many in our audience, I suspect, have seen for the first time about the Church of Scientology?
Yeah, well, I think, I guess the first thing I would like to take up is the fact of the intro piece. There's no question that there's some controversy surrounding Scientology, but if you want to look at what the real controversy is, there's been stories like this one that we saw here for the past 40 years, and yet during that time period, Scientology has continued to grow. In fact, it's 25 times larger today than it was in 1980. I would just like to take up a few of the falsehoods that are in there, because I think this explains a lot why you have the controversy. I don't know that Scientology lends itself so well to the press. In this instance, we did agree that we would have your correspondence come in, and in fact, he did have unlimited access to the church. But then you get a piece like this. For instance, something that isn't mentioned in there is that every single detractor on there is part of a religious hate group called Cult Awareness Network, and their sister group called American
Religious hate
Family
group.
Foundation.
Yeah,
I don't
see,
know
he
if you've
goes
heard of
after
these
the.
people,
Yeah,
but,
exactly. He goes.
it's
This
the same as the
is what
KKK
Hubbard
with the
instructed them to
blacks. I think
do.
if you interviewed
Is
a
to go
neo-Nazi
after the messenger
and
rather
asked
than
them
the
to talk
message.
about the Jews, you would get a similar result to what you have here. The thing I find disingenuous is that it's not commented upon, and yet, in fact, your correspondent Forrest and Deanna Lee were aware of this fact. And not only that, that is the source of where they received these people to talk to. They didn't find them randomly.
If I may just interrupt for a moment, you realize there's a little bit of a problem in getting people to talk critically about the Church of Scientology, because quite frankly, they're scared.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Let me explain something to you. The most disingenuous thing is that you have those people. Now, let's not give the American public the wrong impression that these are people that randomly were pulled in from around the world and that they decide to talk against Scientology. Those people aren't scared, and they've been loudly speaking in the press. You showed me a book you had before this show that has many detractors. Same ones. So they're not really frightened. That's a good story.
Actually, that
But let
was
me
the book.
just finish.
It was a collection of articles that has been written about you
But the same
and the
people are
church.
quoted.
No, what I was saying is the reason, perhaps, that we only hear from those folks is that there are a lot of other people who might be considered detractors of the church, and they, who do not belong to any organization, are quite frankly afraid to come out and speak.
Well, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. That story doesn't hold water, because I'll tell you, from my perspective, the person getting harassed is myself and the church. Let me give you an example.
And they always say
we
that
did
they're the
make,
victims.
access possible for Forrest. That isn't to say that he took advantage of it, Ted. For instance, the subject of money comes up. It comes up routinely, and I'm sure we might bring it up later on in this show. But I, in fact, had the highest contributors of Scientology gathered up so that Forrest could interview them to ask them why they gave money to the church and how much they had. And believe me, it's larger figures than these people are talking about. He told me he didn't have time. I said, please. I mean, they're here. He said, no, I don't have time. I don't want to see them. I offered for him to go down to our church headquarters in Clearwater, Florida, where 2,000 parishioners are there at any given time from all over the world. In other words, he would get a cross-selection, people from Germany, England, California, Florida, Spain, Italy, you name it. Didn't want to go, didn't have time. So to represent also that this is what the church puts forth isn't so, here's what I find wrong, and here's what I find the common mistake the media makes. I can get you 100,000 Scientologists who will say unbelievably positive things about their church to every one you had on there. And I not only am upset about those people not being interviewed, they are too. And the funny thing about it and why you find us not really being that willing to speak to the media is because not just myself, any Scientologist will open up a paper, will watch this program. They're probably laughing right now, saying that isn't Scientology. That's what makes media. Media is controversy. I understand that. And if you really looked at the big picture of what's happening in Scientology, it isn't really controversial, certainly to a Scientologist.
We're going to have to take a break.
Very good.
Okay, all right, let's pause it right there. It's interesting to see the psychology of him and how he rolls, but also like that's why Koppel is a genius. Like he really kind of let him show his own ass there. But it you know, when you use numbers like that right away on a church that we know isn't more than 20, 40,000 people, and you're like, every 100,000, there's only one that's going to complain, and yet constantly, even under fear, there's people who are coming out that would complain, even back then, right? And to totally deny that there's any sort of repercussions when people could see that there's repercussions for people leaving. The balls it takes to, like, sit there and do that is immense. And also, is he like a heavy smoker?
Oh yeah, they all are. That's one of the things about being in the Sea Org is you got to smoke a lot.
Really?
Yeah,
that's like a thing.
See, they're all trying to emulate Hubbard. They're all trying to be swaggering naval officers smoking like chimneys and screaming at each other and there's a whole Hubbard. They all try to become Hubbard basically. So smoking's a big part of it. Yeah.
Tom Cruise don't smoke though.
He's not Sea Org.
But he's Tom Cruise.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a very important ornament for Scientology, but he doesn't run things. That's the other thing I see. I often see people saying that they're grooming him to be like, take over. No, he's not. The only people who can run Scientology is the captain of the Sea Org. Right now, David Miscavige is the captain of the Sea Org, and they will only replace him with somebody that's in the Sea Org. Tom Cruise is not in the Sea Org. He's never going to be in the Sea Org.
And the Sea Org isn't again. It's not like sitting on the ship on like the Hubbard ship. But that's what they call it.
They still call it the Sea Organization. They still wear naval uniforms, but they're no longer at sea.
You wear naval uniforms. Oh my God! When he uses terms like parishioners and shit too, it's just it's so funny. But you had done a whole story with Lisa Marie Presley, who's now passed on,
right?
And what was I want you to explain the whole background there in a second, but what was very interesting to me and telling was that when you found out from her when she was a child and her mother joined, they treated the mother well and they didn't really care about her until they realized she was friends with Michael Jackson and they wanted to try to get to Michael Jackson.
Right. Yeah, that's what she told me. I had lengthy conversations with her in 2015. I had spotted in some music she put out in 2012 that it seemed to have some lyrics that were directed at the Church of Scientology. And I thought, wow, maybe Lisa Marie is, on her way out because this album has multiple songs that seem to suggest that. And then in 2015, I actually got to talk to her and she said, yes, you were right about that. I was on my way out. But in October 2014, she had tried to have this big showdown with David Miscavige because she really didn't like the way Dave was treating his own dad, Ron Sr., who had left and was not being allowed to see his daughters. And so Lisa Marie wanted to talk to David Miscavige about that. She went down to the Flag Land Base in October 2014. He refused to see her. He sent his sisters in to yell at her. She described the whole thing to me. It sounded awful. And so she went back to the hotel and she said, Tony, I told everybody in the family, I'm out. And when we were speaking in 2015, Lisa made it real clear that she had taken Priscilla and Riley out with her. She said, you guys got to come out with me. And so at that point, that was the situation. Mike Rinder also spoke to Lisa in this period. After the attempted showdown, Lisa and Riley went to this house in Nashville they were renting and called Mike. And Mike has described that phone call to me. He said, yeah, I was talking to Lisa about the same thing she talked to you about, this showdown she tried to have with Miscavige. And then at some point, she put Riley on the phone. And Mike said, I'd never talked to Riley Keough in my life. And Lisa puts her on the phone, and Mike said, Riley Keough said to him, you need to take these motherfuckers down.
Whoa.
So there's no question, and at least at that time, in 2014, 2015, Lisa was out, Riley was out, and she said Priscilla was out as well. Now, since then, I never heard from Lisa Marie again after a second phone call in 2015, and Ron Miscavige stopped hearing from her. She went through that terrible battle with Michael Lockwood over their kids. There were reports that she might have gone back to substance abuse. It was a really rough time she was having. We weren't sure whether what was going on with her. And then in 2021, I reported that Riley showed up on Instagram with some photos with some Scientologist friends.
Mm.
So that made us wonder. And then Priscilla has really seemed to, especially in the recent months, she I think in February, she visited with Gottfried Helmwein, the famous Austrian artist. He his stuff. He did the album covers for Rammstein. And
Was he in Scientology?
Yeah, he's been in Scientology since the 70s. Okay.
Wow.
Big time Scientologist. And she was hanging out with him at his show at a museum in Vienna. And then, they did that movie about her last fall, Priscilla, that was directed by Sofia Coppola. And,
really?
Yeah. And Sofia and Priscilla sat down and did an interview, talked about the movie, and a little footage to help promote the movie. And if you look closely at that footage, she's wearing what appears to be a Scientology cross. And this is just a few months ago. So
can we find this? Sofia Coppola.
I put it on my story.
Type in Sofia Coppola and Priscilla Presley interview.
Yeah.
Let's see what that does. So I forgot they have.
So
like
that
their own
suggests
cross.
that maybe Priscilla's back in at this point. And anyway, Lisa tragically died in January 2023. I had never gotten to talk to her again, but I did have my notes from those interviews, and so I wrote the story about. She told me about her involvement in Scientology. She told me about how much she loved Michael Jackson and that it was Scientology that forced her to divorce him.
Because he wouldn't got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and just a lot of really interesting things. No, that's not it. No,
It's a lot of plastic.
no, it's Priscilla and Sophia.
Yeah, I think it was pulling up some of the other.
It's just the two of them. It's Priscilla and that's Sophia. Yeah, that's maybe no, that's not it. That's not the one though.
That one's on Hollywood Reporter.
There's footage they did together, the two of them. Shoot.
I guess Scientology couldn't save her from a bad
well,
plastic
play
surgery.
that one and see. That doesn't look familiar, but I don't think that's the one.
I don't know if you can see a cross there.
Yeah.
Right?
There's another one that they did.
Interessante.
Maybe it's not on YouTube.
Might not be. That's fine. But either way, so you spotted this, and it could be
you
that
can
she's
see it.
in.
Yeah, and it looks like Scientology cross she's wearing. That's just a couple months ago, or in the last year. So anyway, but yeah, I was very fortunate that Lisa told me as much as she did about David Miscavige, about Michael Jackson, about Scientology. Really interesting stuff, and that's at my Substack if you want to take a look at that.
Okay. And we had gotten off it earlier. I think we went down the rabbit hole with David Miscavige when we started talking about his father, Ron, and how he left in 2012, and Ron just recently passed away in the last couple of years. But when his father left, Ron went on a public crusade to out Scientology, and obviously, like, they had no more relationship. What was... did you have an opportunity to talk with Ron a bunch? Like,
yeah.
What do you think? You said, I think you said earlier, like he just couldn't take it anymore and he left. But like, what was going through his mind knowing that his son still ran it? Like it is his son.
Yeah, no, it was tough for him. And I first learned that Ron Miscavige Sr. had escaped from Scientology the same week the news broke that Tom and Katie had split up. That was some crazy week, man. That was 2012. And then I started to hear from Ron personally, privately, about a year after that. We started talking, but he didn't want to say anything publicly until his book came out. And then his book came out, and then he went on a media tour and everything. And then we could talk openly about things. But one of the most fascinating things that happened, of course, you know, when Ron Miscavige escapes.
I mean, how did he escape?
That was... remember I said he and his wife were sending out birthday presents?
Oh, that's right. That was them. Yes.
They mailed birthday presents, and then they drove out. He knew that the guards would assume he was on some mission for Scientology, and they just got in the car and drove away. But then he was subjected to surveillance. And this is a really great story, is that remember I told you about those guys that their job was to follow Pat Broker and so that Pat Broker never knew it. Well, David Miscavige did the same thing with his dad. He put this father-son private investigator duo on his own dad, and their mission was to follow Ron Miscavige, report on everything he was doing to Dave, but don't let Ron know he's being followed. Like I said, they do have investigations they call noisy investigations where they want you to know you're being followed. But their instructions were strict. Do not let Ron know he's being followed. So they attached a homing device on his car so they could just trail him wherever he drove.
That's illegal, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. It depends on the state. It was in Wisconsin. He was living in Wisconsin at the time. He would go to a local restaurant. They'd sit a few booths over and try to eavesdrop on him. And they were keeping tabs on him. Then one day, Ron was coming out, I think, of Walmart. And he was walking across the parking lot. At that point, I think he was 77, around there. And these guys are watching from a distance with binoculars and stuff. And all of a sudden, Ron's doing this. He's grabbing his chest, right? They think he's having a heart attack right there in the middle of the parking lot. Well, he was trying to find his phone, right? So they feel like they have a dilemma. They're not supposed to let anybody know what they're doing, but he's dying. So they call their handler in Florida and say, we need to talk to Miscavige. What do we do? And so they patched him through to David Miscavige and asked him, sir, what do we do? And they claim David Miscavige's exact words were, if he dies, he dies.
Oh.
Now, the reason we know all this was that a little while later, they were hanging out in the neighborhood to watch Ron, and they looked suspicious, these two guys in their SUV or whatever. And so some neighbor called a cop, and a cop came over to check them out. What are you guys doing? Looked in the car, an arsenal of weapons. Okay? And now, look, this is the United States of America. It's not that unusual in Wisconsin for guys to have some guns in their car. But when they looked at it a little more carefully, they realized they had a homemade silencer for a rifle.
Oh.
That's a federal offense.
That's 10 years in prison,
10
right?
years in prison, exactly.
Really?
That's what he was facing, yeah.
No shit.
So now they're in big trouble. And that's why Dwayne and Daniel Powell spilled their guts to a cop. It's all on tape. It's all been I'll talk about how.
Do we have that tape?
We do, and I'm going to tell you how in a minute. So Dwayne and Daniel Powell spilled their guts about, oh yeah, we're being paid $10,000 a week. We have to follow Ron Miscavige. We have to report to David Miscavige. He's the leader of Scientology. This is his father. He wants him followed. I mean, they just lay it all out, right? And Dwayne Powell's facing 10 years in prison for having that silencer. So that's all sitting in a police report. I don't know, 6 months later, it's on the front page of the LA Times. Who do you think made that happen? Lisa Marie Presley.
Oh, shit, that was her?
Yes.
How did she make it happen?
She heard about it from Ron because Ron was told about it. She called Rinder. Rinder gave her advice. She hired an attorney to get the police material, get the police report, and got it sent to the LA Times. The LA Times wrote their story. I later got the actual tapes and published the actual tapes so you can hear the Powells spilling their guts on my website. And it's all thanks to Lisa Marie Presley. She was going. There we go. Audio, right?
All right, let's play this real quick. We just had okay. There's a video right here.
I hope the audio's still there. There we go. Yeah, they're on YouTube.
Right,
I put them on YouTube.
Play the first one.
I put them on YouTube.
No, not that one.
Audio.
The one above it.
Yeah,
that one.
Yeah, you can see the cop there holding the silencer.
All right, let's turn this on and see what it is. Do you know where we should play this in there?
No, it's been 20 years.
I'm talking to your father. Basically, he's working this case you guys are working on. And in doing so, ended up prowling.
Look at the size of that.
He gets arrested. We've been talking. He's laid out a lot of details to us about what he's doing, why, for who.
He's not laying any details out about anything he's doing, for who, or why. Confidentiality agreement, he breaks that confidentiality agreement, we get sued. I'm not going to give you any details on that either.
That's the son.
Well, we can go get...
He's like, well, Dad just did.
And he'll explain to you what he's told. Okay, then I want to talk to my dad.
Well, first of all, slow yourself down. You're not calling shit here, okay? Well, here's the thing. You're not just going to walk in here and get information and walk away happy. That's not how it works.
This is Wisconsin.
Okay? Yes, we know what your dad is working on.
Who's he working for?
Church of Scientology through another private investigation firm who was retained by an attorney who was retained by David.
Okay, well, why can't I talk to him? I've been worried about my dad all day. That's why I'm so upset.
We're in the midst of explaining that to you, okay? But your dad's got a bunch of crap in his car that shouldn't have been in his car as well, okay? And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
What?
Well, these are things that we're going to talk about.
Anyway.
Okay.
All right, let's pause it. Yeah, so this is... We'll put that link in the description.
Very, very
this
nervous.
is 54 minutes right there.
They're very, very
thing.
nervous. They're in a very bad position, and so they end up spilling their guts. And they like I said, they tell the whole thing. Yeah, we're getting paid $10,000 a week to follow Ron Miscavige, paid by his dad. I mean,
$10,000 a week. I might take this job. I don't know.
It was such a major hit, and it was such a clean. See, and what I loved about Lisa Marie's genius was, I think she knew that the LA Times at one time had been the best paper for covering Scientology. In the 90s, they were the best. They were uncovering incredible stuff. But by this time, by 2013, the LA Times seemed less interested, and they weren't doing too much. And so to give it to them, to break that major story, genius. I thought Lisa Marie Presley was such a nightmare for David Miscavige at that point. But I think that this arrest happened in 2013. I think the story came out in 2015.
So why isn't there some sort of conspiracy type charge there, given that David hired private investigators carrying illegal weapons to track his father within range, with the connotation that perhaps they would at some point be shooting to kill?
Dude, there was a laptop they seized that would have had all of Scientology's secret undercover private investigator operations on it. I tried to get that disc it's such a...
Wait, they seized it off these guys?
Yeah.
So they have that.
They had that, and they downloaded all the data from it, and it's been a few years. It's hard for me to explain exactly what happened, but Scientology was so devious in the way they made sure that none of that information got out public. It was so infuriating. They had a cop lying. They had a PI, an attorney lying to a judge, and they managed to get it all hidden. But this was an incredible moment where a small Wisconsin police department had Scientology by the short hairs.
And somehow they got away. That's mysterious.
No,
Something there.
I wrote a whole story about that somewhere else. I had to review that story. It's been so long, but I remember it was so infuriating, and it definitely involved an attorney lying to a court and risking being disbarred by the way he lied to the court in order to get that material buried. And there was still a small chance we might be able to get that material, but it just didn't work out. And I tried to get Ron to help me, and I think Ron by that time was kind of tired of all the stuff he'd been through. It was really difficult. But yeah, amazing moment. And I just wanted people to know that we only know about that case. We only know hear that audio. We only know that Ron Miscavige was being followed by these guys thanks to Lisa Marie Presley.
Again, like, David is still Ron's son. Was there, in the 10 years or so before he died that he was out and trying to do something about this, did he have empathy for the idea that, like, he got his son into it when he was young and so he doesn't know any better?
Oh, he talked about that all the time. He talked about how bad he felt that he got Dave into Scientology, and that he really felt that Dave was a good boy, and it was sad to see him turn out so bad, but that he had, no question that now he was this ruthless leader that was, kind of soulless, and to a certain extent, Ron blamed himself. It was kind of sad. Yeah.
It's it's like a real American tragedy right there to see that. You get sucked into a cult, you pull the family in, you're old when you finally realize it, you don't have much time left, and then your son's like the head of it.
Oh, and when Ron got out, David Miscavige made sure that the retaliation against him was some of the worst I've ever seen. I mean, they just threw everything at him. They made all these terrible accusations about him, and
like what?
That there was this. Okay, for example, he for a Halloween he'd put on some kind of a stupid Nazi guard uniform or something. Oh. So they made sure put that out and everything. I mean, just stupid stuff. And there was an accusation that there was a woman that, well, first of all, that he had beat his wife. Right, which Ron talked about in the book. Said, look, it was a different time in the 50s, and I got rough with my wife, and I shouldn't have, and it's a shortcoming of mine.
That's a bad start.
So but I'm just saying that they just went after him so hard all the time.
All right, so they had some legit stuff though. Okay, all right. Well, I still think no matter what, and he died while his son's still in charge, and probably never gonna get out. That is certainly very tragic, and I guess he was in young, but it's wild to me how many. Obviously, that's like the head of the whole thing, but it's wild to me how many stories there are, and Mark Bunker outlined a lot of them when he was here, where it is the families in. And they get ripped apart when one decides to leave and the others don't. I think you mentioned it with Mike Rinder. His 4 kids are still in there.
His two adult children are still in there.
Right, now he has 4 new.
But he has two. Right. He has a new family.
Right. And have you ever talked with his 2 adult children?
No.
They would never talk to you, right?
No.
But that's so. Their dad. Did they know their dad was in the hole for a long time?
Oh, that's a good question. Did Taryn and Benjamin know that Mike was in the hole? I doubt it, because, you just look. They were all lifers. You don't see your other, your parent or your sibling, and you just figure they're on an assignment somewhere. I don't think they would have been told he was in the hole. Mike might say differently, but I don't think his kids knew that he was in the hole at the time.
But they know now. Because you wrote about it?
Well, I mean, now they're still, the information they're given is so shielded. I don't know how much they know.
Are they in the Sea Org?
I'm pretty sure Benjamin is. I'm not sure if Taryn is.
So if he's not, though, he lives among us like a normal person. He can type into Google, right?
I mean, they use those 2 kids to attack him. And she's made lots of videos, and she's appeared at places. I mean, she's clearly on a program to try to destroy him. So,
do we have videos of her talking about her father?
Probably if you type in Taryn,
Taryn
Taryn Rinder.
Taryn Rinder.
Teutsch, Teutsch is her last name.
Oh, so she married somebody.
I guess.
Okay. So Taryn talking about Mike Rinder. So is this like through official Scientology videos or like out in media?
No, official Scientology videos.
All right. Are we finding
POW
anything?
videos, I call them.
POW videos?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I'm going to start calling them that too.
Yeah.
So they don't... That's so... But... Like, could you imagine your dad, like, has cancer, and you're like, no, I don't talk to him anymore.
Right.
You know, like, there's some things in life where it's like...
Taryn.
It's bigger.
Teutsch.
Would it be on YouTube?
Maybe.
Because that other one was on Vimeo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, while Alessi's trying to pull that up, like, there's some things in life that are just simply bigger, you know, and you would think you're, like, going to forgive certain things. All right, here we go. Let's play it.
I firstly wanted to thank my hundreds of supporters who have written in, responding to my Facebook and my blog and my videos, because I really appreciate the support, because it's the people that are going to make a difference, and all of us actually making Disney listen up and do the right thing and fire Mike Rinder is going to make, you know, your support really helps me. So thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, Disney need to fire Mike Rinder?
Well, because the Leah Remini series was on A&E, which was owned by Disney or something like that. Yeah.
I'm sure that convinced them right there.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were out right when you heard that. Wait, so you were in the Alex Gibney Going Clear documentary, though.
Yeah.
What made Alex want to cover that story so badly? He did an amazing job. He's a great documentarian, but what drew
Alex
him to
Gibney and Lawrence Wright had already done something previously. Lawrence Wright had an incredible book, kind of explaining the background to Osama bin Laden and
Looming Tower.
Looming Tower.
Yep.
And Lawrence Wright and Alex Gibney had collaborated on something about that. You know,
Yes.
Alex is one of the best documentary makers in the world. And so when he came out, when the book Going Clear came out in 2013, you know, they decided to do something together on that too. And I don't know, I'm so lucky they asked me to come on and interview me about some of the things. And they allowed me to, I got to tell about two things mainly. The IRS thing about getting tax exempt status, and Tom Cruise. They used me to kind of introduce Tom Cruise and what. And you know, they told us they were filming it in like April or May 2014, and then they were telling us it's going to come out at Sundance. I was like, oh, I'd like to go to Sundance. And they said, well, you know, if you can get yourself there, you get to go. I said, oh, okay. So I paid for my flight, you know.
That's all right.
And that's all right. And went to Sundance, and they had to put it in the biggest venue because there was so much demand. People wanted to be at the premiere. And there were, you know, people like Alec Baldwin was there, and there were several.
Anti-Scientologist Alec Baldwin. Let's go. All right.
Anyway, big crowd. And I didn't know what to expect. They asked me to give a few interviews on the red carpet and stuff. I was like, I figured I'm in there for 30 seconds. And then I was in a lot more than I expected. I was surprised. It was kind of thrilling. But really, you know, it's really more about the Scientologists that had come forward. Jason Begay and Spanky Taylor, and of course, Mike Rinder.
Spanky Taylor was the assistant for
Travolta.
Right. Okay.
And so it was an emotional night. It was something else to see that film, and Alex had done such a great job with it. So yeah, I was thrilled to be a part of it, and I just like the fact that I got to introduce Tom Cruise.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And like obviously you've covered that for a while. And when we had Mark in here, Mark was the guy who leaked those videos back in what, like
2008.
Yeah.
Yep.
And which are just incredible
videos
to watch.
Yeah.
But is there, I've always kind of wondered this. I think our mind goes here with a lot of these things. It doesn't mean it's what it is. But whenever I look at cults, and you've seen so many of them that kind of go this way, is there like any weird sexual innuendo to Scientology itself? Like, is there any form of like sex cult within it?
You know, that's what's interesting is that, look, it's based in California and Florida. It's kind of out of the 60s and 70s. And so I think a lot of people sort of automatically assume it's some kind of a hippie free love kind of thing. Julian, it's a business cult. Their fetish is business rules. They're obsessed with business administration. It's the most... I don't understand how people don't die of boredom in Scientology. I mean, you're reading all this crap. You're doing these exercises that are mindless, and they're obsessed with the absolute best way to run a business. There's very, and they're very uptight. Now, you talk to some Scientologists, they'll say, yeah, definitely in the 70s, there were a lot of people hooking up, and it was, part of the counterculture. But today, no. It's very, very conservative. It's a fundamentalist religion. It's a fundamentalist group. You're giving
them too much credit.
So
keep going though.
No, but they and people get married very young in the Sea Org because one of the reasons is that people they supposedly are not bringing in 12, 13, 14-year-olds anymore. Now it's
that's who was around Hubbard, right?
Now it's 18-year-olds. Well, I've seen some 16, 17-year-olds, but they're pretty young. And you go into the Sea Org and you're assigned a room that's got sets of bunk beds, and you got like 6 guys in a room with one bathroom, right? Yeah, imagine, and that's day after day after day after day after day. There's no privacy. It's just awful. They get married at 18 because then at least a married couple gets their own room. They might have to share. It might be an apartment with 4 other couples. You're still sharing, but at least you get a private room with your wife. So that's why they get married very, very young, because the alternative is just awful.
That's like a strange reason, like the way they set that up.
But they want them married. They
don't want them having kids.
But not having kids.
So they're handing out condoms at the door. And birth control pills.
Don't you dare. If you get her pregnant, you guys are both being shipped off to Siberia.
They're like that about it.
Yeah.
They'll put you in the hole with your kid.
Well, they've been forcing women to have abortions for decades.
What?
Yeah. No, this has been well established. Women are coerced into having abortions. And multiple women have come forward. Claire Headley was forced to have 2 of them.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And they've talked about this publicly. Not only are there no kids, but when the women get pregnant, they are under incredible pressure to have abortions. I know.
I've never heard, actually, let's speak their language and say from a business perspective, this makes no sense. Don't you want, right. And hey, I'm happy they're not bringing, I'm not happy to hear they're forcing abortions and all. That's horrible. But I guess the next generation, they're not crazy about bringing into it. I guess that's a win for people. But that's how you don't survive.
You're right. You're exactly right. But they've got this mentality in the Sea Org that they're racing to save the planet, and the way they're racing to save the planet is by bringing these people in to do their bridge, to do their auditing, to follow all these rules Hubbard set down, and it's a 18-hour a day job. They barely have time to do any sleep. You wouldn't have time to raise kids. That's the idea. You just don't have time.
18-hour a day job.
Oh, yeah, they work day and night. They got almost no sleep.
To do what?
I know. That's what people always ask. What do they do in Sea Org? Well, they have people doing auditing and cramming and testing, and it's just all mindless garbage. It's nothing. But when you're in it, it all feels like it's the most important thing in the world, and it's all last second, and you got to do it now.
And it gives them some sense of they feel like they're in control for some reason, even though they're completely controlled.
They feel like they have the only secrets to the universe, and they are the only ones that's going to save this planet. And if they aren't working at 80 miles an hour, day and night, every day, then the planet's going to collapse.
What about Scientologists who marry non-Scientologists?
It can be really tough. It happens, and they can work it out, but it can be very tough. They really want you to marry fellow Scientologists. Not only do they want you to marry fellow Scientologists, they want you, especially if you're an employee, like in the staff or in the Sea Org, to marry somebody in your particular strata. So that was one of the pressures.
Slim pickings.
That was one of the pressures that was on Mark and Claire, was that Claire had been promoted to this one area and Mark wasn't. And so there's a lot of pressure to get divorced. So they go through a lot of divorces and marriages in Scientology.
Oh, so they pressure them to divorce if they change status.
If they're in different areas, right.
And the divorce, obviously it's all done legally through like the US or something in that case.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not that hard to get a divorce in the United States.
That's true. That's true. There was one recently, and I have not done my own homework on it or anything, but there was something a little while back with a woman who went viral on TikTok as a single mom, where she was like making her own birthday cake and crying or something.
He denies that he's a Scientologist. She said that he was a Scientologist. He has now denied that.
Okay, and when you say that, we're talking about her ex-husband who then responded and tried to paint her as crazy.
Right, Elizabeth Teckenbrock, and she made that video. It's 30 seconds long, 45 million views on TikTok. He then responded and said, she's not who you think she is. She's been arrested. She's lost custody of her kids. She faked cancer, et cetera, et cetera. She then came back and said, yeah, he's been saying these things about me for years because that's what Scientologists do. People were like, whoa, Scientologists. And her proof was that on a website about her, there was a link to a Scientology website. I went and checked it out. She's right. There is a link on that website. He denies that he put up the website, and he denies he's a Scientologist. I cannot find yet any independent corroboration that he's a Scientologist. But
he lives in Hillsborough County, though, right?
He was working in Clearwater, right there.
Not looking good for Buddy.
And she was married to him. And when she says he was a Scientologist. So at this point, I'm still reserving judgment. I'm not sure that he was a Scientologist or not. However, if you look back, you go back over the things he's posted, he's not looking too good either. And I mean, it's just a shame that these two people are having this awful fight in public like this.
Yeah, that's terrible. I'll reserve some judgment too, I guess, because like I said, I haven't looked into it enough. But some of the shit doesn't look great. But
I said the woman's name. I should also say the man's name. His name is Andrew Cormier. He's an optometrist.
Okay, got it. So, do you think that people who exist in a brainwash cult like this, removing the fact that some of them are forced to marry or incentivized to marry people that they probably don't even like just because like they're there in the same room with them or some shit like that, removing that and looking at maybe the people who aren't in the Sea Org, who live out among people and really date and stuff like that, do you think that people who are consumed by a business fundamentalist oriented cult like this have any capacity for love? Do they know what that is?
It's often been pointed out, Hubbard came up with something he called the tone scale. He believed that there was a way to reduce human emotions to a numeral, and that hate was a certain number and envy was a certain number. And the Scientologists could then use that to help them communicate with people, so that if somebody was at a certain number on the tone scale, if you address them at that tone yourself, yeah, exactly. It's just all nonsense. But multiple people have pointed out that on that whole tone scale of emotion, from high levels of emotion to low level, the word love never appears. And so who knows? But I mean, Hubbard, this is also something the Church of Scientology never talks about. You cannot find anything about it on their website. He had 3 different wives. He had 7 different children.
Yeah.
It's all erased from Scientology's websites. And
it seems like you're not in a position to be able to, and I feel such empathy for this, for the people in it. Like, you're not in a position to be able to feel real human emotion. You're kind of, they put you in a place where quite literally you're operating outside your body. I think the visual of trying to find the Thetans on you, like, I'm going to take that a step farther and say it's almost like you have to look at yourself and look at where the Thetans are, almost takes your soul out of it. Like, you understand what I'm saying?
That is a fundamental concept in Scientology. It's called exteriorization. The goal of going through these exercises is so that you can exteriorize. Because remember, you're a Thetan. You're not this body. And ultimately, you want to be able to experience the world as a Thetan, pure spirit form, outside of this thing we're walking around in. So you're right. Exteriorization is a major concept in Scientology and a major goal. And
takes you away from your spirit.
The other thing I was going to say is that all Scientologists will tell you that if you're doing Scientology properly, all your emotions will go away. You will become an emotionless human being.
Oh, and that's a goal.
That's what they want.
That's what makes life good.
And that's what, when people cut out of Scientology, they'll tell you they start to feel their emotions coming back.
And that's crazy though, because that emotions are what make life great. And,
you know
and
what
that
the
includes
first thing
all
you
of
do?
them,
You know
including
the
the negative ones.
You know the first thing you do in Scientology? The very first thing? It's called TR0. You sit down, they have you sit down in a chair, you and me like this, except we'd be closer. Our knees would almost be touching. And then we just stare at each other. And we just stare and stare. I think very first with your eyes closed and then with your eyes open, and you just try to stare as long as you can without blinking. And then after that, they move on to something called bull baiting, where you would try to hold as still as possible, staring at me, and I would hurl insults at you and try to make you flinch. And if you could just hold perfectly still, you had succeeded. Now, at the end of doing that for hours and hours and days, what do you end up with? You end up with the person that can just do this incredible, emotionless robot stare.
Rockwall. Yeah. Controllable.
And that's when you're knowing you're dealing with a Scientologist.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense for like you'll see some of the confrontations that happen and these people seeming, wow, I can't imagine that. The fact that that's a goal to be emotionless. It's like when people say, "Oh, I want a world with just all winning." Listen, we all want a world without wars and shit like that. I'm with you, but like it is the fact that life can go either way, in cruel ways and great ways, that makes, ironically, life worth living. And when you remove that for this utopian thing, it's not. The human function is not meant for that environment.
Yeah.
What do you think the future of Scientology is with an organization size as small as it is, in the social media era where people can share some of these things, in an era where Leah Remini has left and gone all out? Guys like Gibney have made documentaries. People like you exist writing about this every day. Where do you see Scientology 20 years from now?
I mean, I think there's no question in the time that I've been watching them, there's been a lot of change in the way the press has covered it, the way that the public seems to be much more up on it, much more than before. It's become more and more tough for Scientology to do any kind of recruiting because the word is out. On the other hand, they are so determined and resilient, and they just will never give up. And they have a lot of money, and they still today are able to have influence on law enforcement agencies, politicians, businesses. And, we talked about it earlier. Where's the government? I mean, it's so obvious these abuses have been going on. Nothing's been done. So on the one hand, I see more and more people saying, oh, Scientology's days are numbered. It's in big trouble. On the other hand, I keep seeing them win in court in ways that are kind of shocking. And so I don't know, David Miscavige, as long as David Miscavige has a big pile of money and a bunch of attorneys that'll do anything he wants, I think they're going to be around.
Are there any candidates that you know of behind him if he died or moved out of the way that you think could be as ruthless, or is this unknown?
There were several people that he had around him as lieutenants, and then he put them all in the hole.
Huh.
So it's been a few years, but one of the more recent defectors, I asked him that question, and he was saying, Tony, they've gotten rid of just about anybody. At this point, the only person I think that we could even be thought of as a number two is a woman in Los Angeles named Carrie Ellis. I said, who? And he said, yeah, exactly. Nobody's heard of her. But that they're down to there's just nobody. And then, if David Miscavige was the subject of an investigation or was somehow, removed, I think Scientology would have a really hard time doing again what they did before. Listen, when L. Ron Hubbard died, there was a good chance that it was over for Scientology. Yeah. But they managed to survive that. David Miscavige, you got to give him credit. He not only managed to get them past that, they happened to bring in Tom Cruise right at that time, and then they managed to get tax exempt status. So that kept them going, and now it's 30 years later. If there was another crisis, would they do as well? Maybe not this time.
Well, it's all extremely fascinating to cover. I will say that your Substack has some amazing stories.
Thank you.
You're right at the You're at the middle of pretty much all of it. You look at any big story over the past, especially decade and a half, like you've been right there. So we will have the link to your Substack down below, along with any other socials you want on there. But we're going to have to do this again at some point.
All
There's
right,
always
Julian.
new stories. But
You bet.
thanks so much for coming in, Tony.
Right on. Thanks, Julian.
All right, everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace. Thank you guys for watching the episode. Before you leave, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. It's a huge help. And also, if you're over on Instagram, be sure to follow the show at Julian Dorey Podcast, or also on my personal page at Julian D. Dorey. Both links are in the description below. Finally, if you'd like to catch up on our latest episodes, use the Julian Dorey Podcast playlist link in the description below. Thank you.